Good morning, everyone. We're going to start in 1 minute. Please take your seats.
They can't hear you.
People in the back, take your seats. We're going to start in 1 minute.
Hear us say we're trying to get going, so.
All right, delegates to the 2019 Convention of Better Angels. We're now starting. I'm calling this session to order. So find your seats, and we're going to cease our conversation, although they were great conversations. I have two important facts to announce. First of all, did you know that today, June 21st, in 1788, was the day that New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the U.S. Constitution, making it the official law of the land. That was the 9th state that was needed to cause us to come together as a country. I have a second fact to tell you about, and that is Marisa has some patriotic symbolism to show us. Now, the camera, if you could get a...
He's shaming me.
No,
this is
we
public
talked
shaming.
about that. No. Absolutely wonderful. Now, Marisa and I, her nails are red, white, and blue for the patriotism of this event. She and I are the red and blue co-chair of the Sacramento Alliance. I could not let her do this alone. I also have had my nails done. Now, you can't see them. But they're there, so. There will be no questions of information on that item. So the first order of business, we're going to call up, is it Kelly and Karen who are going to make some announcements and explain some stuff today? So if Karen and... Okay, so we have a mic here, and we recognize those two delegates.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. How are you? Did you all get something to eat, I hope? If not, there will be coffee at 9:30. Okay. So the good news is that we're all here. We're up bright and early. There's a couple things we should just mention. First of all, if you have trouble walking the long distance to the dining halls, we can provide golf cart service for you. So one thing that you should know is the meal times listed in your agenda. If you would like to take a ride rather than walk to the meals, please meet at the clock at the beginning of the meal time. So if it says 5:45 to 6:45 for dinner, you would meet at 5:45 at the clock, up there, just up the hill, and we will drive you over there. If that does not work for you, if that's going to be even too far to go up to the clock tower, please come to the info desk and talk to me or Leah, and we'll make alternate arrangements. For the breakout sessions, there will also be a golf cart leaving to go up to the North Campus. So if you happen to be in Siegel Hall for your breakout sessions and you need a golf cart ride, we will provide one for you. The other thing I'd like to mention is that if you lose any items while you are here, you can first inquire at the info desk just outside the doors. And if we are not able to help you, we will connect you with our partners at the university who collect items from around campus. So those are the first two announcements. The other thing I'd like to say is that at lunch today, it's a busy dining hall, is it not? Yes, folks? Yes. So, however, we would still like to encourage you, if you're able, to meet up with people from your region or from your state during lunch today, so you can meet people that are closer to you. There will be a leader for each sort of region who will have a table tent. Donna, would you be able to hold up one or stand up and show us what these would look like? Thank you. Welcome, Donna Murphy. Woo!
Thank you. Yeah, so what we have here is a table tent for Michigan and Indiana. So this is going to be a pain because it won't let us go in early. And we don't have a monopoly on the dining hall. But if you look for a table tent with your state on it, and it might be a table tent that's on a table for two for 10 people from your state. Not going to work, right? So you're going to have to scamper and find someplace to meet. Now, you can meet outside. There are tables. There's the Orchid Hall, which is opposite where you get your food. That's got some big tables. And the people who are coordinating this know that there are about 4 or 5 rooms on the second floor of the dining hall that are larger that can also be used. So good luck. I know we kind of messed it up. We should have had a separate breakout session, but we did think it's really important for you to meet geographically if you can.
So just if you happen to be one of the state or regional leaders, if you have a pen, there's the rooms upstairs you can go to are 233, 240, 241, 242, or 248 in the Danforth University Center. That's in the dining hall building. I will say it one more time. Rooms number 233, 240, 241, 242, and 248. And there's also a lounge space upstairs that's called the Fun Room, which has like a pool. I don't know if they have a pool table or something like that. So the idea is just to use the table tent to try to meet up with people from your region and then go find somewhere where you can actually all sit down. So if you'd like to do that, we really encourage you to do so. Look for the table tents at lunch. Otherwise, if it just is too difficult, find somebody else to talk to and have a nice time. All right, so Ciaran, please welcome Ciaran O'Connor.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name's Ciaran. I help direct Better Angels Media and host the Better Angels podcast alongside my good friend and illustrious co-host, John Wood Jr. I have 2 announcements this morning. One is we have some press covering the Better Angels convention, so you might see a couple reporters wandering around, a camera crew here and there. You're very much encouraged to speak to them if you like. You're also welcome to decline. No one's going to get quoted by name without their permission, but a big part of bringing our message to the nation is press. And so if you want to go speak with a member of the press, have an interview, talk off the record, whatever you want, please do so. The second thing is social media. We are live streaming the convention both today and tomorrow. So right now, if you go to our website, right on the homepage, we'll have a play button. You can press that. It's a few seconds delayed, so don't be worried if you check in and it seems like it's not matching up. We're live streaming it. We also encourage all of you to post on social media about this. Take photos, take videos, share stories, use the hashtag BetterAngelsConvention, and just basically feel free as much as possible to help us promote this through your networks coming out of the convention as well. The last thing I'll say, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on Saturday, we're going to have a bit of a competition coming out of the Better Angels Convention to see who can sign up the most new members by July 4th. So just keep that on your mind if you're hosting a barbecue or something like that. The baseline is 4 by the 4th, so we want each delegate to try to recruit 4 new members by July 4th. But for those who want to go above and beyond, I think we're going to have a little competition. We might be able to have a prize or 2. We'll see. So we'll new car. Actually, Greg is going to be... talk to Greg about that one. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on Saturday as we finish the convention, but I just want to put that on your radar and get you guys thinking that, we really want to enlist each and every one of you to help us scale this work. And a big part of that is membership, and the other big part is stuff online. So please post, use the hashtag, take photos, and tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I have something very exciting to share with you guys this morning. You heard yesterday from Bob and Tom, who was originally on the schedule for this morning, but we have a very special red-blue pair coming to us from video, hopefully behind me here in just a moment. And so you'll probably recognize them, but I'll go ahead and do a proper introduction. Richard Gephardt is a blue, former House Majority Leader and Congressman representing St. Louis, where we are here right now. And so please enjoy this video.
Hello, my name is Dick Gephardt. I was formerly Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, and I'm thrilled that the Better Angels delegates are meeting in my old hometown, St. Louis, Missouri. I first heard about Better Angels in 2017. I was on a members call with Better Angels sponsorship with Rusty Reno, a conservative writer, and we talked across our divisions and our disagreements and showed each other respect and how people who disagree can talk together, learn from one another, and work together. Polarization is ripping our country apart. It's citizen versus citizen, neighbor versus neighbor. Even families are being ripped apart by political disagreement. Our democracy is threatened. Democracy cannot exist if half the people literally hate the other half of the people. You can't find any agreement. You can't even communicate with one another. Better Angels is trying to bring us back together, showing that people can disagree, can even dislike one another, but they have to respect one another and be willing to listen to one another to try to find common ground. So I'm honored to be part of Better Angels. I'm inspired by all of you delegates who are working hard day in and day out to make these conversations happen, because you're standing against division. You have to remember that in a democracy, it's united we stand, divided we fall. God bless the United States, and God bless Better Angels.
That was awesome. All right, and our red of the red-blue pair is Ben Sass, who is the U.S. Senator from Nebraska. Enjoy.
There are 5 freedoms in our First Amendment: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And these 5 freedoms are at the heart of who we are as a people. That's because America is an idea, the commitment to the universal dignity of persons everywhere. Government is just our shared project to protect that dignity and preserve our rights. Americans have serious disagreements about many important things, and that's okay. We don't have to wallpaper over our differences, because America exists to give people that space to disagree. But we can also disagree without being disagreeable. We can debate passionately and still love our neighbors. And by doing that, we'll prove that the American idea, the inexhaustible dignity of every person, is true at all times and in all places. Thanks for what you're doing and for how you approach the American idea. Have a great day.
Wonderful. So we're getting national attention from national leaders, and they're behind us too. So for the next portion here, Donna Murphy is going to come up and explain some of the progress. Right here. Donna, if you want. Yeah, I'm sorry. She's going to explain the progress that we have made in the last year in Better Angels. So here is Donna Murphy, delegate from Washington, D.C., or I should say Virginia. Virginia, delegate from Virginia. Is this working? Yeah. And by the way, probably the single most devoted single volunteer in Better Angels for the last 2 years. She has coordinated so many efforts. I would say next to Bill and David, she is the reason that we're here today the way that we are.
Thank you, Steve and Marisa. A year ago, we convened our founding convention at Eastern Mennonite University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. We had 147 delegates from 28 states plus Washington, D.C. And the vast majority of our delegates were from East and West Coasts. We had nobody from Missouri. And from the contiguous states to Missouri, we had 17 delegates. Last night, we convened our second convention here at Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, with 266 delegates from all 50 states in DC. Yeah. From Missouri, we have 15 delegates. And from its contiguous states, we doubled the number of attendees. How did we get from Harrisonburg to St. Louis? That's what this speech is about. And the answer is, it's me. It's all me. I did it by myself. Actually, if that were true, I'd be in an insane asylum right now. I'd be sitting with my fellow patients asking, what false or misleading stereotypes do people who are sane have of people who are insane? No, getting to St. Louis took the dedicated efforts of a flight of angels, even though we use other categories besides cherubim and seraphim. So let's talk about our volunteers. A year ago, we implemented online moderator training. Approved applicants could learn online how to moderate workshops, and now Better Angels moderators are running workshops across the country. And in the past few months, our workshop architect, Bill Doherty, has been giving them more to do. Blue skills and red skills workshops and depolarizing within workshops. So we have almost 350 trained moderators, and we are incredibly grateful to them for their efforts to help depolarize America. Moderators, stand up and take a bow. Organizers, courageous, fearless organizers, have put together over 450 workshops and debates since we began. Organizers are the heart and soul of Better Angels, all 625 of them. They roll up their shirt sleeves and do whatever it takes to make these workshops happen. You are our miracle workers. And you have something in common with Helen Keller's Ann Sullivan, who brought the light of understanding to the deaf and the blind. If you have ever organized a Better Angels workshop or are an enrolled red or blue organizer, please stand up and let's give them a hand. State coordinators are the glue that holds together the members, organizers, and moderators in their state. We attract consistently excellent, motivated people to this crucial volunteer position. We're on a quest for 102 state organizers, one red and one blue in each state plus DC, and we are well on our way. In your program, you'll see where we still need state coordinators. To learn more about the position, talk to anyone with state coordinator on their name tag. And please join us at the meeting for state coordinators tonight. Yes, if you're at all interested in becoming one of the most important and best connected people in your state with Better Angels, please join us at the state coordinator meeting at 9 p.m. tonight in the Bears Den. If you are a state coordinator, we love you. State coordinators, please stand up and accept our appreciation. After you've attended a Better Angels workshop or debate, you can start or join a local alliance. We currently have 34 local alliances across the U.S., from San Francisco, California, to Austin, Texas, to East Hampton, Massachusetts. The Alliance's red and blue co-chairs are amazingly creative in coming up with programming and attracting both red and blue members. These co-chairs embody the spirit of reds and blues forging friendships and working together for the common good. If you are an Alliance co-chair, please stand up and receive our gratitude. We've been holding separate monthly Zoom conference calls for our moderators, organizers, alliance co-chairs, and state coordinators. They provide training, and they also make us feel like a family. They do. And by the way, I'm looking for one red experienced organizer to work with a blue organizer in running the organizer call. See me? Okay? We also hold monthly member calls. If you're a member, you can participate in calls where our guests have included Jonathan Haidt, Andrew Walker, Francis Fukuyama, and John Pudner. And next Wednesday, our theme is red and blue pairs. We'll have 2 married couples and a set of identical twins. Beginning in March this year, we rolled out our Better Angels Debate Chair Training Program and began holding community debates. April Lawson, our parliamentarian here, is also the architect of our debate programs. And yes, we stole April away part-time from David Brooks and the Fetzer Institute's Weave the Social Fabric project, and pretty soon we're going to nab her full-time. We have now 45 trained debate chairs who held several community debates, and we've only just begun. At the college level, we've held student debates at American University, Graceland University, Eastern Tennessee State, and Virginia Tech. And with the help of the American Council of Trustees and alumni, we'll continue to expand debates on college campuses. At the high school level, we pioneered debates for students at a high school history camp last summer. And we will now be holding Better Angels debates in Loudoun County, Virginia high schools. If you are a trained debate chair, please stand up and receive our thanks. We're also working harder to reflect America. To be honest, when we started, we were mostly middle and upper middle class, college educated, and white. We're now striving to attract working class people and people of color. We still have a long way to go, and we hope that many of you sitting in this room today will help us. We've held special nationwide events. In January, David Blankenhorn gave an inspirational Better Angels State of the Union address from my house in Fairfax, Virginia, with folks watching both at home and at public viewing parties. Last month was the grand premiere of the documentary Better Angels Reuniting America. Some of you saw that last night. And that was broadcast from the barn of Tea Party supporter Richard Lynch in Waynesville, Ohio, with some people watching at home, both at home and at public viewing parties. That film is now available for free group screenings, and it is a fantastic way to introduce people to Better Angels. Meanwhile, the Better Angels media wing has become more active and more credible, expanding its audience, featuring prominent podcast guests such as Vox Media's Ezra Klein and former president of the American Enterprise Institute, Arthur Brooks. On our website, we host regular commentary and journalistic content from ordinary Americans to respected political leaders alike. This team is led by Red John Wood and Blue Ciaran O'Connor, who are the most photogenic members of our male staff. I'm sorry, Bill Doherty. I'm sorry. I had to be honest. Now, John is married with 3 children, but ladies, Ciaran is available. Along with the beauty, they have marvelous brains. In addition to co-hosting the Better Angels podcast, our public argument work has led Ciaran and John to campuses and conferences across the country, from UC Berkeley and Lynn Benton Community College to the Global Philanthropy Forum and the Aspen Institute's Weave the People gathering. They write widely circulated essays and op-eds in publications ranging from Quillette to Fox News. Better Angels representatives have attended many events designed to bring together organizations that promote conversations, bridge divides, and foster civic engagement to get us to learn about and collaborate with each other. This includes the Urgency of Civility Conference held by the Masonic Family Civility Project, the Summit for Democracy, sponsored by Freedom House and Stand Up Republic, the Unrig Summit, organized by Represent Us, a monthly breakfast held by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a Bridge USA conference, and a conference organized by the Alliance for Peacebuilding and the George Mason University School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. We participated in the National Week of Conversation, sponsored by the National Conversation Project, and we are proud that Rotary International published a 4-page spread about Better Angels in a magazine distributed to its 1.2 million members worldwide, and that will present at the Rotary World Peace Conference next January. Yeah. Better Angels is, down to its core, a grassroots organization, bringing together ordinary people for conversations that bridge the divide. But we held skills workshops for some members of the Minnesota State Legislature and red-blue workshops for mayors in the state of Maryland. We'd like to work more with politicians. How did we get from Harrisonburg to St. Louis? With loads of hard work by Better Angels across the country, motivated by a desire to get people to change their minds, not about the issues, but about each other. To realize that those on the other side, well, they're not so bad. You know, we could be friends even though we disagree. And in forging those relationships, to realize that there is common ground that we can build upon to create the more perfect union that our Constitution promises. Thank you.
All right, so Donna, you're going to stay up here.
I'm going to call them up. I got them. They're going to come up here. Okay, we're good. Okay, at this point, because if you announce it, I don't get my joke in, okay? At this point, David Lapp, April Lawson, John Wood, Ciaran O'Connor, and Kelly Schumann-Andino, they're going to come up here. And I'm feeling positively geriatric by comparison. And we'll all be happy to answer your questions. Somebody get me my cane? So at this point, we are all happy to answer any questions from the floor.
So there's a question in the back. Thank you, Kuya.
Good morning, Cynthia Berkshire, Los Angeles, California. Our staff has been amazing, and what you've pulled together, the difference between last year's conference and this year's conference just speaks to the level of organization and efforts you've put in to date. Thank you. Could you give us a feel for what the national staff looks like, paid staff, and what sort of funding base you're working with to fund your operations, hoping that there is some compensation for all the hours that you're putting in at the national level? Thank you.
Okay, so here's some of our staff. They're all paid, but meager salaries. I'm full-time volunteer because I'm crazy. And Bill Doherty is a full-time volunteer. And we've got David Blankenhorn, who is paid staff. We also have Hillary, who is someplace around here. There she is. Hillary's paid staff. And we have a woman who likes to stay in the background. She's our part-time bookkeeper named Charity Navarrete. She's in New York. I think that's... Kelly? Kelly, where's Kelly? Kelly is supposed to be up here. But she's probably running around putting out a burning fire. But Kelly is also part-time paid staff.
Can I just make a comment? Yeah. Another question. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just make a comment about that? And that is, it's pretty incredible when you think about how, beginning in 2017, one workshop, 0 members. 2 years later, everything that you heard. Folks, there's 5 staff. This thing is not happening at an office in New York City. This is happening because of delegates like all of you and us. This is the work of people who care about America, ordinary people doing in their communities, and it's really a tribute to just the incredible volunteer energy that is all of us.
Okay. So,
Okay, sorry, Steve.
Somebody, the questioner asked about funding. About 20% of our, well, last year's budget was about $900,000. About 20% of it now comes from membership dues. You know, you've all joined, so it's $12 a year to be a member. Our goal is to keep that.
But you can contribute more than that.
That's why Donna's the lead organizer. Yes, you can contribute more. And actually, a lot of people do. So 20% and rising every month. And our goal is to have more and more of sort of member-owned, member-owned, member finance. That's our strategy. We also have some generous foundation donors and individual donors. I would say at the foundation level, we have a Better Angels rule too about foundations. So we want an equal number of, as close to we can as an equal number of right of center, left of center. The Hewlett Foundation has been a generous donor. The Einhorn Family Charitable Trust has been a generous donor. They tend to be perceived generally as left of center. The Koch Foundation has been a supporter. The F.M. Kirby Foundation has been a supporter. A number of individuals have donated, significant amounts of money, $25,000, $50,000 to us. And let's see, is there any? Yeah, I would say that's about it. So right now we're 20% and rising membership funded, and then the rest from foundations and individual donors who are also members of Better Angels. The theory of fundraising, our approach to fundraising is it's all given by members. It's just that some members have time and contacts and grassroots connections. Some people have money, and they can give more to support the work in that way. So that's the fundraising.
all right. So does someone else have a question? Please, over here, in the red.
Hi. I'm curious. After I sent my holiday letter this last year and talked all about my Better Angels workshop, I had friends from all over the country who said, oh, I'm having trouble talking to my family members. I really would like to go to a workshop. And I don't know what to do with that information. How do I say somebody who's in Connecticut or somebody who's in New Mexico, how do I link them up? Or how do I let people in those areas know that they would like to attend a workshop?
Okay, good question. So we now have on our beautiful redone website, thanks to Jim Ewell and others who worked hard on it. We have at the top, it's called Find an Event, and they can press on that and they can see by state or by type of workshop what's going on near them. Now, it's not perfect because sometimes it'll only be put up there a month in advance, if that, and then it disappears. But that's one way for them to easily see what's happening soon. We also have our state coordinators, so you'll see under our leadership, and there's a page that has all the states, and each state has got a state coordinator. It doesn't let you guys off the hook because a lot of times that state coordinator doesn't live in the state, and we want coordinators who live in the state. I'm state coordinator for Wisconsin, okay? I don't live anywhere near that state. So they can go there and they get to name the state coordinator and they can email the state coordinator. Yes?
An addendum is, I don't think these people are going to reach out to us. I think they need an invitation. As many people who come to a workshop are invited, that's the mechanism I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, It's easiest for us to do that if they have at least subscribed to us. And there's a place on one of the pages at the bottom, says like, what does it say? Find out. Anyway, they can put in their name, their zip code, and their email. And then when we're looking for people for workshops, then we do email lists, and we can email people who live near where the workshop's going to be. I mean, yes, you can give us their names and email addresses, too. You can do that. It's hard for a busy and harried state coordinator to necessarily keep track of it, but they can try. But it's best if at least they're subscribers, which means they don't pay us any money, but then at least we can reach out to them. Okay?
Okay. As a co-chair of an alliance, I'll just add to that, invite people to be an organizer. It is easier, of course, if somebody else sets it all up. Oh, I'd like to come. But if you get someone passionate enough, and that's how we've grown in some areas, say, look, you get one other person, a red and a blue, go organize it, we'll show you how. And then you're bringing in volunteer help as opposed to just more volunteer drain where we got to run around and find them a workshop. And by the way, when you ask a question, you can ask it of any of these folks up here. You may have a specific question about the podcasts or the parliamentary or something. Couillard, do you have a person there? I can't see. Very good. Person in black.
Hi. Mark Beckwith, Worcester, Massachusetts, and I think this question is for David Blankenhorn. As I understand it, Fetzer is also involved in funding. Am I correct? Oh, I'm so sorry. But that leads to another question. Their extraordinary array of volunteers. Is there a fund development committee? Are they run by volunteers? Or, David, does that mostly fall to you? Because as I did the math, it's $700,000 a year to raise.
Yeah, and also, thank you. I can't believe I neglected to mention the Fetzer Institute. And if there's anyone here from Fetzer, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll mow your lawn for a month for free. Fetzer has been an incredibly generous partner and friend, not only financially, but in other ways as well. It's funny, you mentioned fundraising is kind of our Achilles heel. We have we have a staff, a paid, we don't use the word staff, we use the word leader, but if you want to think about paid people and call them staff, we have a ratio of staff to volunteer of 1 to 147. So for every active paid person, there are 147 active unpaid persons. But it wouldn't help to have a little gas in the tank in terms of finances, and that has been a weak point. So we do have a volunteer fundraising committee that meets through Zoom once a week. They're doing great. They're getting up and running, and we have a great coordinator. So that's a positive thing. And so we're trying to. We also want to form a board development committee. We haven't done that yet, but that's what we want to do. So we're a little bit behind in terms of our fundraising capacity, and we also. Where we're doing best is at the membership level. We're doing very strong growth on membership, which is, of course, the most important thing. So Ciaran mentioned we're going to have a fundraising drive coming out of this convention. That will also, in addition to building our muscle as an organization, that will help us financially as well. So if anybody has experience or a desire to work on fundraising, whether it's research on people who might be interested in giving, whether it's writing proposals or there are other reaching out to prospective donors to try to set up appointments for people to go visit. We have a working group, and it's really wonderful. They're just wonderful people, and if anybody would like to be a part of that, if you have some time, even 5 hours a week, let me know, and I'll be very happy to meet you.
Great. Another question? So this is your chance. Yeah, I got it. This is your chance to ask any of these people about what you see about how Better Angels does. So let's take Luke's person here, and then I see a person there. Couillard, if you'll get them next.
Thank you, Mark Epstein, and thank you so much for the staff and volunteers for bringing us here and for the past year and a half. My question speaks back to the convention of last year, and one of the principles adopted in the declaration was a research and scholarship end of it, trying to determine the efficacy of basically transformative learning that's supposed to be going on here, and documenting not just the attempt at depolarization, but the efficacy of it through efforts like this. So I just want to know the status of the academic side of that.
Who would like to take that?
Is Jane Jacobs here? Jane?
So Couture, if someone could get a mic to Jane, who is in the back row. Thank you for standing. That helps.
And exactly what was the question? Because I couldn't hear entirely what you're saying.
If you could repeat the question.
Sure.
Yeah.
At the convention last year, one of the principles that was adopted in the declaration was to pursue academic research into the efficacy of efforts like this, about whether or not we just meet and we feel good about it and then we leave, or is it really effective at transforming thinking and communities in the country. And so I wanted to know the stats. Since it was a principle that was adopted last year, I just wanted to get an update on how that arm of the organization is moving.
We are just getting started on that. We have, we are using the feedback forms from workshops as a starting point to get people's immediate experience of the workshop. And we've now entered data from 1,800 participants. And we're in the process of carefully analyzing it to see what we can reliably say. In the future, we want to develop an expanded project where we actually follow people after the workshop and see what happens to them. Can they maintain their skills? Are they influencing other people in their community? But we really need an expanded staff and some funding to do that. And so that's something for people to keep in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. So Jane is our relatively new evaluations coordinator. Thank you, Jane.
Couture, you had another question person here, I believe. So go ahead and stand, say your name.
I'm Cindy from Arkansas.
Wonderful.
I had a question for David Lapp. Can you share with us a little bit of how the search for making Better Angels more attractive to Reds is going?
Sure. So as many of you know, Better Angels, so for this convention, for instance, about 60% of applications came from Blues, about 40% came from Reds. So there was, several dozen Blues who didn't get to come because we have a strict, principle of, at these conventions, exact equality. So so that has been, we shared this challenge last year. One of the things that we've done is, since last year, is we have Better Angels debates. And for instance, I'll just share, when we gave you the choice to sign up for breakout sessions, at the convention, a lot of Blues signed up, but even more Reds, signed up for the debates. So the Better Angels debate is another way of doing our work that I think is oftentimes a little bit more natural for conservatives. Not always, but so that's one thing that we're doing that we think is a natural fit for many conservatives. The other thing that we're doing is Paul Norris, I think, is in the crowd somewhere. Paul Norris, Red Delegate from San Francisco. Paul and I and a couple of Greg Smith and others have developed what we call a Red Caucus. So we meet weekly and monthly to talk about how we can do a better job of finding and keeping Reds within Better Angels and preserving a culture that is hospitable to Reds as well. So all that is going forward. If you're interested in serving on the Red Caucus and joining us, talk to me or Paul Norris. So yes, the work is ongoing, but we have, we are seeing, what we do know is that at this convention, for instance, 60% Blues, 40% Reds, that's not so bad. That's pretty close to equal. So we know that conservatives are interested in this, and I think we're doing a better job of reaching out to them.
All right. Another question? So Luke has someone, and also try to migrate a little bit to make sure we're getting geographic. Your name?
Hi, I'm Miles Eddy, a delegate from Bloomington, Indiana, with strong roots in Colorado. And in the workshops, they emphasize that the training is for live, face-to-face conversations. My question is, how is social media being used in Better Angels National, and what are some of the pitfalls and solutions you're finding to manage the online conversation, since the training focuses on live face-to-face?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's both a challenge and an opportunity. Oh, thank you. When we first started moderator training, it was basically just Bill leading in-person sessions. And so that limited us geographically and in many other ways. We've since taken basic moderator training online, so that's basically expanded our capacity in that respect. And then we're growing our digital presence across various channels. So our Facebook page has grown, doubled, tripled, quadrupled since I first joined. We're now active on Twitter, we're active on Instagram. We have a lot of video content that we've gotten. And so one thing I really want to focus on is empowering volunteers to help expand our digital footprint. Because right now, to date, the digital team started basically just me and John, and we have a lot of other things to do, so kind of like tweeting on our phone, when we think to do it. We've since expanded the digital team. We've brought on Albert, Luke, Greg, Randy. But I would say, I imagine that of all the folks here, there's a significant percentage of people who are digital natives and who are active on Facebook. Don't spend too much time on Facebook. But if you're somebody who likes to help out with social media, please come and talk to me, because I think we can figure out ways to really bring our message wider. There's Albert right there in the back. You guys should go say hi to him too. And then on the larger question about digital marketing and systems management, I think that's something that we're taking a look at right now. When we first started, I got us up on a very basic platform called Action Network, which essentially allowed us to send emails, do basic online fundraising. But now that we're growing as an organization, we really need to professionalize our operations and integrate them across web, social, marketing, fundraising, digital advertising. And so that's something we're doing, building up the capacity within staff. But I know volunteers like yourself, I believe, have a lot of experience and ideas and expertise in this area. So I think we're all ears, and we're all learning as we go. So I think if you guys have ideas, particularly on the digital side, and John and I are going to be leading a couple sessions specifically dedicated to that, where we can really dive in, we'd very much appreciate it. And I think the podcast, too, has been a helpful vehicle in getting our message out. I would encourage any of you, if you're interested in podcasts, maybe take a stab at doing your own podcast. Erica Munson from Utah Steve and Marisa did a podcast in Sacramento, which was super interesting. Erica Munson from Utah just started her own podcast called A Place at the Table, where she basically invites someone over to her kitchen table, they have a conversation, record it. So if any of you guys want to do your own podcast, it's a little scary at first. The first time you listen to your voice, you're like, oh man.
Tell me about it.
I did not realize I said that much. Or it's like, and it's like, oh man, am I gonna go back and edit this? But you get better at it, and it actually becomes really rewarding and fun. So if any of you are into podcasts, come talk to me, can provide some basic guidance. And basically it's like, go forth and do it, and you learn as you go, and it gets better. And so it's been a really interesting and exciting opportunity for me and John. And so I think we're developing these content vehicles that we can leverage to grow our reach. But I think this is an area that has a ton of potential, particularly on the advertising and marketing front. So please come to our session if you want to dig in, and we'll go from there.
Albert, hang on. I'm going to move on because we've had someone who's been wanting to make a question. Can you help me? My co-chair has been pointing out something. Is this woman here? Kuya, can you come up and have a mic here? Oh, Luke, you were close too, but. So if you could stand up.
Hi,
And
I'm
you are?
Sherry Jung from Clemson, South Carolina, and I think I tried to find a TED Talk on Better Angels. Where are we with that?
We are going to do a TED Talk in Austin in November.
Great.
It's on the books.
So let's have, I'm going to say 1 and then 2, and then we'll see if we have time for more because we're coming up on 9:30. That's good. Thanks, Luke, for taking 2.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Couture. I'm from Naples, Florida. And I was wondering, y'all were talking about the high school history camp. Is that the only place that you've done the high school debate, or is there other places as well?
So 2 things. The first is that the high school history camp, we're doing it again this year, and it's actually very intensive. It's 5 classes, which each do a debate every week for 4 weeks. So we get a lot of data and a lot of testing from that. And we're learning a lot. And like I said, we're doing it again this year. And then we are also exploring a pretty significant engagement with high schools, but it's not finalized, so I don't want to sort of talk about all the details right now. What I can tell you is that Loudoun County Public Schools want us to do as many debates, which is in Northern Virginia, want us to do as many debates in their high schools as possible. And so one of the things that we're working pretty hard on right now is designing, so they would love for us to do as many classrooms as we can. And Loudoun County is an interesting county in that it's actually quite diverse. They have very affluent, very much not affluent, a lot of different kinds of immigrant communities. And so it'll give us a lot of information about where these sort of, how these debates sort of happen with different kinds of students and different kinds of schools, different kinds of teachers. The other thing I'll say is that we're looking at a balance between AP classes for high schools, and because we have a partner that will help us scale that if that really works, and also non-AP classes, because one of the purposes of debates is to help people who feel like there are all these political things happening around them, but they're kind of alienated themselves from what's going on, actually participate, like take a stand, jump in, speak and be heard in their group. And we think that's really crucial for high school students, maybe even especially those who aren't sort of traditionally academically engaged. So that's one of the other factors we're considering. We'll have a better update for you on that by the end of the summer or next year.
Thank you.
And just one quick thing that's really exciting to me about debates, something that John and I have noticed from going to college campuses, is that polarization is a huge problem on a lot of college campuses. And so with high school debates, if we can equip high school seniors with some of these basic skills and experiences in talking to people they disagree with, they can then become leaders when they are incoming freshmen on college campus. And I think as we're thinking about polarization as a longer term problem, there's a ton of potential for high school debate, so we're super excited.
Can I do just one more thing, Steve?
Yeah.
Anyone who's a high school or college student here, please stand. All right.
Thank you.
Woo-woo!
Thank you.
Love these guys.
All right. Luke has a question here, please. He's going to stand. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christiana Peterson, the lone delegate for North Dakota. And my question is, I'm looking to run for office, and I come from a very red state, and as you can see, I'm blue in North Dakota. And I was just wondering if you guys had any plans of, because you mentioned wanting to get more political, Donna had mentioned that earlier with political, debates or getting that. I was wondering if there was, because in order for me to get elected in my state, it's going to be very challenging. And so I can use all the help I can get. So I was just wondering if Better Angels had anything to make so we can be more balanced in our state. I was just wondering that.
Well, there's something I'd like to say to that. And I, by the way, am a person who was a nominee for Congress myself a few years back as a Republican in South Central Los Angeles. I can kind of relate to my liberal friend in North Dakota. So, Better Angels does not have a policy at this point of endorsing candidates. But one thing that I happen to feel could be a vital function of particularly our Better Angels alliances going into the future is to build up these local Better Angels communities, these hubs of Better Angels across the nation that, as they mature over time, become necessary stopping points for people and politicians on the campaign trail, right? Because one thing, there we go. Because one thing I know as a person who's run for office and who's seen many people run for office is that when the only people who are there to talk to in an audience are people who are activists, who are, committed, passionate, but they may be very polarized, way to the left, way to the right, which is fine, but it has a definite impact, excuse me, on the tone of our elections. And so if we were to be able to organize communities of American voters across this country who are motivated by their political passions, but who are also informed by this ideal of what we call patriotic empathy here at Better Angels, that part of our purpose as citizens is, yes, to advocate for our political beliefs, but also to do so in a way that honors the dignity of the other side and engages each other in a reasonable and rational conversation, our elected officials and our political candidates will follow suit. So I would love for us to be able to build up Better Angels alliances in your state that you would have an opportunity to come to and to make your case to in the Better Angels fashion. And that would apply to any and all other political candidates as well. So there you go.
So we're running out of time for questions.
Could I just add one thing to what he said? I'm sorry.
12 and a half seconds.
Okay. All I want to say is that Bill Doherty has been doing some exciting work in Minnesota, bringing our workshops to legislators. So if you have more questions about that, there's a session today on bringing Better Angels' message to political leaders, and I'd encourage you to get to that session if for some reason you aren't already assigned there.
And there's going to be time throughout the conference, pull somebody, ask a question, take initiative. We won't make this launch if everybody, especially the committed people here, say, well, when do you have that ready for me? It's more like, in Sacramento, we just said, I don't know how to do this. We're going to go out and do it. So I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions now, and I also apologize. I feel like I now know what a 4-point whitetail looks like seeing his first F-150. I can't see everyone's hands raised in the back because of the lights. So in the next question and answer period, and so we're going to turn the lights off so we can see better. So I apologize to people that we didn't get to. It's 9:30. It's time for our break. Now, when we showed up here today, we were only 3 minutes late. So that's really good. But this high-performing group, I know, can be better and could be in their seats and ready to go at 10 a.m. when we reconvene. Before I let you go, is there anything I'm missing, announcement-wise? Okay, we'll see you at 9:59. We'll be starting in about 1 minute. Everyone who's out in the lobby, if they could start to come in. If they can't hear me in the lobby, if anyone near the door could start to invite them back, that would be great.
And you're giving this intro.
You're giving it.
Hello, friends. Hello, friends. If you can hear me, it's time to come back. Don't make me use the gavel. That's unpleasant. All right, if you are in the back grabbing a cookie, grab 2 more cookies and come back in. Thank you for everybody that is already here and seated. I appreciate it. We're on a little bit of a time schedule right now because, hi guys, come in. We're on a bit of a time schedule because some of you have signed up for sessions that are a little bit of a walk. So we want to give everybody a chance to get to their breakouts. And I would like to invite up Bill Doherty and Kelly, if you are around, Adino. Kelly. All right. So Bill and Kelly are going to come up here in just a moment and talk about the breakout sessions, which we'll be moving into. And so I'd like to welcome up Bill and Kelly.
Oh, is everybody caffeinated and cookied? Okay, the 2 major food groups. So I just wanted to explain what we're about to do. We have 2 categories of breakouts. One is to give you an experience of a Better Angels workshop and conversation, an experience. And if you look at the topics, there aren't many places in the country where people could come together in respectful conversation and expect this to go well, as it will, around some of these really tough issues. And then the other kinds of breakouts are briefings. They are special topic conversations to update you, to learn what you're experiencing in your community. And so that's what the rationale is, and you've had a chance to choose. I think there is room people can go to other things. You've got inspired or turned off, then you can do that as well. So, Kelly?
So first of all, Marisa, can I borrow your folder? All of you should have a folder that you received at registration. Can you pull that out, hold it up, just kind of, there's a sticker on it. So look at that sticker with me for a second. If you're looking at the sticker, it should say your name, and then there's going to be days and some other words going on. Find Friday AM. Then your breakout session is listed underneath Friday AM, the one that you'll be going to right now. If you have 2 sessions listed for Friday AM, would you raise your hand? Great. You all are going to the briefings in Siegel Hall. So you are going to be going to 2 different sessions. Each one is 50 minutes. If you just have one listed at Friday AM, please raise your hand now. You're going to a longer experiential session that will, for the most part, be on this lower section of campus. If you are going to How Can Religious Communities Help Heal America, raise your hand. You are going to be spared the long slog up the hill. And instead of meeting in McMillan Hall, you are going to meet in the Bear's Den, which is this dining sort of area, literally straight out those doors. Okay? Sound good to you? That's what we thought too. Okay, so for the briefing sessions, there are going to be people walking over together. So again, if you have 2 sessions listed, raise your hand. I'm talking to you now. Those of you with 2 sessions listed are going to follow Rob Robertson. So Rob Robertson, can you come down the main aisle, please, here? Do you have your things? Are you ready to depart? He's ready. So he is going to walk out that way. I would wait, please, until Rob is all the way out of the hall, and you will congregate with him outside, and you will walk up together. Now, don't leave yet. Some of you may not be able to walk the long distance, right? So we have a golf cart departing for you, which is also outside. So can you raise your hand if you would like the golf cart to Siegel Hall? I see 1, I see 2, I see 3. Okay, so we're gonna wait for 5 minutes. I would, right now, if you know you wanna take the golf cart, please start moving outside towards the golf cart. It is parked outside. So we are going to now, at this time, ask the people going to briefings to get up and leave, to go outside to meet Rob Robertson in the purple shirt.
Okay, while you're walking out, you can keep walking, but I just want to make a reminder that we are meeting back here after lunch at 1:45. So after you have lunch, please come back here at 1:45.
Great. We'll take care of it, Greg. Okay, so once all of these folks are out, we will give some more specifics. So can I have the 2 debate chairs please stand? Dan Cornfield and Mel Pine. Okay, come on into the center aisle here so people can get a good look at you. Great. I see one. I'm looking for Mel Pine. There he is. Great. These are the 2 debate chairs. So if you're going to the Military, Defense, and American Foreign Policy debate, you are going to be looking for Dan Cornfield. If you are going to the Immigration and Social Cohesion debate, you are looking for Mel Pine. So what I would like now is for those of you who are going to these 2 debates to stand and follow these gentlemen out, and then you will go to your respective debates. Yep. You, Mel, let's see. Mel, you're going to Ursa's Fireside. Hillary, would you be able to walk Mel to Ursa's Fireside? It is up where we did registration yesterday, where the MSNBC was going on. Oh, Luke is going to lead him. Thank you. Okay, so the debates. Debate 1 and debate 2, you're dismissed. Go outside, please, to the outdoor patio, and then find your debate chair. Debate chairs, give them a few minutes to all get there, and then you will walk over to where you're going. Okay, next we will do the religious community. How can religious communities help heal America? So you all are spared the long walk, and you are just going immediately out across. So let's give one more. You can stand up, get your things, but let's give the other debate folks a minute to get out the door. All right, and that leaves those of you in the issues workshops. So if you're moderating an issues workshop at this time, can you please come up and stand in the center aisle? We're looking for Paul Norris, Tiffany Feit, Karen Reiner, and Cynthia Berkshire. I see two of you. I see Paul. Is Cynthia Berkshire here? They're wonderful. Great. Okay, so for the Karen Reiner's abortion workshop, session A, you are going to stay here in College Hall. So Karen, you can sit down. Thank you. Those of you in that session will be staying here. Those of you going to the other session B of Abortion Kills Reproductive Rights Issues workshop are going with Cynthia. Cynthia, you're going to go down this hall, kind of go around a little bit, and there's going to be a private dining room there with a Better Angels sign on the door. All right, you can leave now if you're going with Cynthia to session B of the Abortion Kills Reproductive Rights workshop. All right, if you're going to Taxes, Welfare, and Role of Government with Paul Norris, session A. Paul, were you in the Thomas Elliott seminar room already? So you know where you're going. Great, so follow Paul out, please. And if you are going with Tiffany, you're going to the Liggett Koenig lower level seminar room. Tiffany, have you been to that room before? Okay. Okay, so have anybody, if you could stand if you're going with Tiffany. Has anyone in the dorms there going to live in Liggett? They're staying in Liggett. So you're going to go to Liggett, you're going to go inside, you're going to go down the stairs of the elevator, and you're going to go to the lower level and walk the hall. You're going to find a seminar room. Should have a Better Angels sign on it. All right? You all can head out. Thank you. Okay, so that should leave only in this hall people going to the Abortion Kills Reproductive Rights Session A Issues Workshop. Is that correct? All right, you all can come up to the front, and we're going to set up some chairs for you.
for when you're talking. And I'm going to go to the other side as well.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. I'll get over it. Thank you. I will talk you through it real quick. Here is that for you. So this is being streamed, so we do need you to talk into the microphone a little bit so that they can hear you on the stream. Currently, they're on. We're going to keep it low in the house because it's pretty intimate. There's no reason to have it play. If for some reason they get turned off, on the bottom of these two microphones in particular, on the back side right here is the on and off switch. If it gets turned off for some reason, it takes about 5 seconds to reconnect once you turn it back on. Yours is just this one on, again, 5 seconds or so for it to connect. Okay, any other questions? We'll be here the whole time.
Okay, thank you everybody for helping with the setup. We weren't able to set the room up in advance, obviously, because we were using the room. So thank you for your furniture moving skills. My name is Ciaran O'Connor, and I'm going to be moderating and facilitating this exercise with you today. And I've got my back to the camera, and I don't know if that's a problem, but I'll try to turn like this. So appreciate your help getting us set up here. So here's the process that we're going to do. We're going to have two groups. We have reds and blues. And each group is going to take a turn in the middle answering a couple of questions. And the group on the outside is going to be purely listening. The group on the inside is going to be talking to themselves. Okay, so you'll be making, if you're making eye contact, make eye contact with other reds. Don't make eye contact with the people in the back. So it's a conversation among you with the blues listening in the back, and then we'll be switching, and the blues will move to the middle, and the reds will move to the outside. So your job when you're in the middle is to answer the questions, to speak for yourself, not on behalf of your entire group, but your opinions, and to answer your questions honestly and truthfully and from your heart. And the blues are to listen, and you're to listen for listening for understanding and for maybe where you find some common ground. The goal is to learn how the other side sees the issue and to see if you have anything in common. And the real work of this exercise is done by the observing group, the people who are listening and learning. So the blue team has to do the hard work up front because they're doing the listening and the learning. When she won the coin toss, she thought she chose the easier. So here are the ground rules. The conversations occur within the fishbowl. So this inner semicircle is the fishbowl. No comments are addressed to the outside circle, and no verbal or nonverbal responses are to come from the outside circle. So if you blues on the outside, if you disagree or are shocked by something, you're not to make any verbal or nonverbal reactions. For the folks in the center, you're focusing on your own position and don't characterize the other side's position. So for example, you wouldn't say something like, unlike the other side, we base our views on reason and not emotions. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to characterize the other side. The idea is to stick to your own views and let other people describe theirs. And you should feel free to speak for yourself. You're not representing a group or party, only yourself. So, agreement?
Yes.
Okay. So we've already flipped the coin. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with two questions. I'll read them aloud, and then we'll address one at a time. So the first question for the red group is, where do you stand on the issue of abortion and why? And then the second question is going to be, what are some potential downsides to your position? And you're invited to consider limitations of policy ideas, perspectives on the other side that you might not understand, or unintended consequences that come with many public policies. Now, I need to get my phone out only to use it as a timer, but that reminds me, if you have a cell phone, if you'll silence it, that would be really helpful. Now we have a couple of microphones. I think what we'll do is, as people want to speak, just gesture to the person close to you that has the microphone. So red team, you ready to start?
Actually, I wouldn't mind another reading of the question.
Another reading of questions,
Yeah.
yep. So the two questions are, the first one is a shorter question. Where do you stand on the issue of abortion and why? And we're going to spend about 12 to 15 minutes allowing each of you to share that if we need that much time. If not, we'll move on to the second question, which is, what are some potential downsides to your position? And when you're considering what's a downside or the definition of a downside, you might consider limitations of your own policy ideas, perspectives on the other side that you may not understand well, unintended consequences that come with many public policies. Okay, so we'll start with the first question. I'll repeat it, and then we'll move on to the second question. I'll repeat that one again. So the first one is, where do you stand on the issue of abortion and why? And is there anyone who would like to go first?
All right, well, I'll go ahead and jump in and just to get things rolling. And where I stand, I don't have a firm stance. Like this is, the reason that I came, I will just say, is that if there's gonna be any place I can actually have a conversation with people about this issue, this is probably the room it's gonna happen in. And this is not the conversation I wanted to come to, this is just the conversation I felt like a duty to come and speak at. So, oh, sure. So for myself, again, like my position is that I have a nuanced position. I want to like be able to hear what people have to say, and that's really why I'm here. So I'll just start with that.
My position isn't nuanced. I think you are ending new life, and who gives us a right to do that? And that's why I have serious concerns about having as much going on as there is in our country.
My position is pretty nuanced as well. I do believe you are ending a life. It is not a developed life. Has to be a terrible decision for someone to have to do that. But I'm kind of in the middle. I think the Supreme Court's not going to change its mind, so we just have to work together to decrease the number of abortions versus drawing a line in the sand. I think we need to find some common ground, and this is the one issue that over and over you just can't. It seems like if someone's very passionate about it, there's no budging from each end. So I'm very interested to see if we can find any common ground.
I guess I've been involved in this actually more than most people probably here for a long time, dating back to when I was a junior high school student in New York City. I was asked to take part in a classroom debate about abortion. I was maybe 13 years old, around 1965. I didn't get really actively involved until probably the 1980s, and I won't go into the details on that. I think it should be largely restricted because, again, what's really at issue at the heart of this is how do we determine the value of any human life? And I don't think there's any doubt about when a human life begins, an individual human life. It's not a question about when life begins. That's one of the many confusions of the issue that people throw out. It's about when an individual human life has its beginning. And how do we value it? If we don't value it as having intrinsic value, then all of us are at risk. And it's just a matter of whose criteria for the choice to destroy it will prevail. All the wretched excuses and abuses through history arise from those kind of decisions being made. And the things that distinguish the different cataclysms that have occurred are just whose criteria for choice prevailed. They could have been racial, they could have been religious, could have been about politics or social class, all kinds of things. The problem that pregnancy brings us, I don't know if I'm going on too long about this part of this question.
You're okay for now.
Okay for now. Basically, I'm opposed to it. I could see some of the more extreme so-called, what do they call them, exceptional cases about medical issues. I don't expect anyone to sacrifice their lives or being required to do that. And I mean, the mother has to live for the baby to live in any case. This particular issue has been plagued by terrible abuses of language, all kinds of misnomers, oxymorons, and euphemisms. One, for example, just an example, is viability. An unborn baby is perfectly viable, The word means able to live in the early stages of the human life cycle, well before it is able to live outside the womb independently. And to speak of viability as occurring when it has achieved lung development, that's like demanding that a tadpole be able to live on dry land before it has acquired lungs. That's simple nonsense. So viability should be spoken of perhaps as intrauterine viability and extrauterine viability. At any rate, one of the problems we have on this issue is that life before birth is a continuum from a single-celled zygote to just prior to birth, and there's a very big difference in those early stages of the human life cycle as far as our ability to relate to it. The thing is, if we make anything on that spectrum other than when the life actually begins at conception, again, fertilization, the zygote, a time when we're going to permit abortion for other than a severe medical reason, we're basically saying that we can rationalize destroying anyone based on whatever criteria we recognize as having significance based upon our own value system, whether it's heartbeat or brain waves or so-called viability or anything else. If we make anything other than the fact that that it is a human individual of our species, we're putting lots of people at risk. And that's enough for now. I got a lot of other things I'd like to say. Thank you.
I think I am pretty much of the same mindset as a lot of you here. I am pro-life, but a very nuanced stand in terms of certain exceptions: rape, incest, life of the mother. I have 3 children, and 2 of my pregnancies were very high risk. I think that made me appreciate the viability of life even more. I have 2 teenage daughters, and I think that's also, talking with them about this issue has made me look at it in a different light. My older daughter looks at it very philosophically, and she's also pro-life with some exceptions. The one thing I thought was interesting is we live in New York City, and recently when she was thinking of this more as a policy issue as a 17-year-old, she says that she would like to see more mandatory counseling done with minors who are pregnant, because in a lot of the states they don't have that when they're trying to consider if they're going to proceed with terminating a life.
I am basically, well, like others, I'm kind of torn and on the whole subject, but I think my basic stance is pro-life. But I know that there are situations, there's a lot of different situations, but I tend to lean towards bringing a child into the world, that there are many people that can't have children and just, put the child up for adoption. So I lean towards pro-life and bringing that child into the world, but I'm torn at times by different situational things, as mentioned, medical risk and so forth, but I do lean pro-life.
I definitely lean pro-life as well, obviously. I'm still kind of, with people talking about nuance, I'm still a little wishy-washy on it. I don't know entirely a whole lot, which is part of why I'm here. But my current stance on it is that I don't think that abortion should really be a thing, except for what you guys are saying with instances of the mother's life is in danger, or if it's like a rape situation. But other than that, I think that the pregnancy should still go through, and that there shouldn't be a reason for that life to be ended before it kind of even has a chance to kind of start, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Wow, I managed to go last. That was pretty cool, even though it was right here. Yeah, so obviously this is a difficult issue for a great many reasons, and I think some of the thought processes that we go through are maybe perhaps more or less valid than others. And so one of the arguments that people do start with or feel conflicted with is they tend to use the extreme example to argue for the universal. And I think that that's not really the best place to make the argument, no matter what side you're on. When people say, yeah, what about rape or incest? Well, okay, let's talk about rape or incest. If we can agree that that is a terrible thing and then, abortion should be allowed, then now can we move on and talk about it when those examples are not the case? Because most of the time that's not the case. So that's one that I kind of like to put aside as a separate conversation. Another one is this idea of when life begins, which is really, I think, the big consternation that everybody on both sides has. What concerns me about that, I don't have the answer either of when life begins, as far as saying here, I have definitive proof, so now you can't argue with me. But I think that's exactly the point, is that when we're talking about human life, we should err on the side of caution. And right now, at the development of our science in the world today, we are assigning arbitrary beginnings for life in an attempt to use this argument, right? So you hear viability, you hear, well, okay, abortion. Some people say, well, I think it should be allowed, in the first trimester, but not after that, right? Up to 22 weeks, or whatever. People have different ideas of where they're comfortable, but if we are really, I think, honest with ourselves intellectually, then we have to admit that those opinions are arbitrary. I don't know that life is somehow more important at 20 weeks than it is at 12 weeks. So this is where you get to the conception argument. What concerns me, I think, about this idea of trying to set an arbitrary place for where life begins is there have been people in our history who have assigned value to human life and who have been extremely dangerous in our world because of that. I think it's something we should consider as a culture, the conversation we're having about when people's lives are valuable, because we don't know. And, Pol Pot in Cambodia exterminated people because he did not value their lives. There's been slavery where people were considered half a human, and worse. There was the extermination of 6 million Jewish people because they weren't valued, they were subhuman. But this is actually the same kind of decision when you think we're deciding when another human being that, if left to its own devices, would develop and grow into a human being. We're deciding that, I don't know if you made it to 12 weeks, you might have been okay, but 8 weeks, no. That's very arbitrary. So I think that's just an important point. And then the last one I wanted to mention is the inconvenience argument, because women, I'm a woman, so I think I can say this. This is my own opinion, right? But, it's my body. You can't tell me what to do with it. But I think the inconvenient thing, yes, it might be financially inconvenient, it might be the wrong time in my life and all of that. I have 2 kids. There were times in my life that it was very inconvenient to have 2 kids and afford them and pay for them and deal with them. And yes, it was hard. That didn't give me an excuse to exterminate them. So I think it's just more of a consistency issue for me, too.
Regarding the issue of when life begins, I look at it as a rather simple way. When does a seed start to grow? When does a plant start to live? After it's fertilized and starts to grow. The question is, you have life within the womb. Is not an embryo growing every day? Are not cells dividing and growing? To me, that's life, growth, and that occurs after fertilization. Otherwise, you are looking at arbitrary, medically defined definitions of when life begins. To me, it's very simple, at conception, because after that fertilization occurs, what happens? Growth begins. And it's going to continue to grow unless what happens? You take steps to kill the growth of those cells.
Do we have time?
We have about a minute if anyone wants to go on with where they stand on the issue of abortion.
Real quick, to kind of build off what you guys were saying, I don't really even think it matters about discussing when it sort of begins. At least when you're talking about when that baby is in the womb, that kind of thing. Because either way, if you let nature kind of run its course, at some point, I think everyone can say that it will be a living being at some point. And so, let's say it's 2 weeks, you don't consider that a living being or whatever, and you kill it then. you still have technically ended that life because it's not going to get to that point ever because you stopped it before it could.
I'll jump in and just say that I think that, thank you. One of the other things that I've heard people talk about, we're talking about right now, like when does life begin? And I don't think that that's the only question that people are considering when we're talking about as like as a nation. And I think one of those questions is like, what is the harm that we're doing? And one of the things I think of is consciousness. Like, when does consciousness begin? And that's a point at which we can say that there's a significant amount of harm being done. So I'm not saying that I feel one way or another about it, but I'm just saying that I think that's another large part of the issue that is independent of when life actually begins.
All right, we're going to move on to the second question. And this question is a little bit longer, so I'll read it for you again. The question is, what are some potential downsides to your position? So the question is actually short, it's just the description of the question that's longer. So as you're considering what are some potential downsides to your position, consider limitations of policy ideas, perspectives on the other side that you may not understand well, or unintended consequences that come with many public policies. So who would like to answer the question, what are some potential downsides to your position?
I'll go ahead and start again and just say that, again, my position is nuanced. My position is that I'm not taking action, I'm listening, which I guess is an action in and of itself, but I'm not advocating for one direction or another. And I think that while that is a good thing to be doing, there are also people on a daily basis being affected by the state of the decision for our nation right now on, I guess, both sides of the issue, but people are being affected, and I'm just kind of not taking direct action, and that can be a bad thing. So,
I think we've taught several generations of Americans, thanks to the Supreme Court's act of judicial tyranny, frankly, in 1973, that abortion is a right, and there will be consequences to that if we go back on that at this point, just as there were consequences all around for both white people and black people after slavery was presumably abolished. We had taught generations of Americans that this was acceptable and even a right for some people to own others or subjugate them in some way or other. And we're going to experience things like that for a long, long time for having tolerated this abuse. I don't know if I want to get in, I could go on for a long time about some of the things that have already been said. I have to wonder how I or anyone would respond if we make an exception for something like rape to the people I know who were conceived by rape. And I meet such people having been involved in the Right to Life movement. Some of them are quite active about it, fighting for their standing in the human community. Some of them are children. There was a movie out called Room, and I don't know if you saw the movie, but the grandfather of the child who was conceived by rape of his daughter, who was kidnapped and imprisoned, the grandfather looked in a very negative way upon his own grandson. And I don't know where this comes from. These children are not monsters. They are normal human children. And this whole business of rape, I understand that it's obviously a nasty thing and an emotional issue. The child is not changed. If anyone can tell me what the difference is between a child conceived by rape and a child conceived by an act of love, I think I'd have to give them the point that ought to be an exception, it ought to be allowed. But again, all these things, all the issues, and I remember this even from my classroom debate in probably 1965 or so, are matters of what can abortion do for women who don't want to be pregnant for whatever reason. Relationship problems, wrong time, economic problems. There's all kinds of reasons you wouldn't want to be pregnant, all kinds of reasons you wouldn't want to give birth and have a child, whether you intended to raise it or not. It's a difficult thing to even give a child up for adoption. So, these are some of the things we're going to have to deal with, but how do I want to put this? a lot of the arguments I've seen over the years have to deal with saying that I have the right to expel this other human individual from my body. To me, that seems like an assertion of a property right, the right to deny use of something you own to another, and it's making a property right superior to the first human right, the right to life itself, without which all other human rights have no significance and no meaning. And I want to just, this is kind of out of the blue, I don't know whether it relates to the question at the moment. It seems to me that, and this is just me, the people I've flown this by on my side of this don't like it. But I'm going to try to say that pregnancy, this is an assertion, pregnancy is a custodial relationship where the stronger party, the mother, and she's a mother if she's pregnant, it's not something that happens at birth, the mother has responsibilities to the child. And if we're going to give permission to women to walk away from those responsibilities as a society, we are going to be saying that our society regards women as not just the weaker sex physically, but also morally, socially, emotionally, politically. You will never have equality if that's the way we're going to go with this. This is a responsibility that needs to be shouldered by women. It's part of being female. You may think that's easy for me to say. I don't want to take up too much extra time with it, but I had the experience of having the government make a claim on my life when the year I turned 20 years old, 1972, being entered in a draft lottery for the Vietnam War. And the potential consequences for men of something like that are far graver and more significant than the consequences of women generally for pregnancy. And I don't know, if we can make demands like that on men for things that they had absolutely nothing to do with, as far as causing a war, for example, why can't we ask women, in most cases, obviously not rape, why can't we ask, or even demand of women that they take responsibility for a situation that is of their own making?
Anyone else? What are some potential downsides to your position?
Well, I'm, again, very nuanced. We've mostly discussed the right of the baby, or the child, the developing life, but I always really try to consider the other side as well. The mother or the woman, and how that will affect her life, her future, her opportunity. And I think a lot of women would lose a lot of opportunity when they have these children. I do think restrictions might be, that's okay. States can put some restrictions on them, but I think just women, I don't think that right should be taken away. I think abortion's wrong, though, at the same time. So I guess just working together so women don't have as many abortions, or prevention, is kind of what I would rather see.
I think, kind of to your point, I think one of the things that people who are pro-life need to do a better job at is discussing the woman and what it means for women if abortion, let's say Roe v. Wade was overturned, right? That's sort of where we are in our culture in the conversation. And I think what we haven't been good at explaining is that if Roe v. Wade were overturned tomorrow, it would not make abortion illegal. It would revert to the states, which is really where our Constitution and our framers intended to have things that aren't mentioned explicitly in the Constitution to revert to states. And I actually can't think of a more powerful way to provide diversity than to release it from one central power down out to 50. So if you can do that, I think if people really understood that, I think there might actually be more of perhaps a political will to say, yes, let's open this to the states, because then there's not just either or. It's, you can live in Seattle, Washington, or Alabama, and you can have a very different experience. And so that might be a place to have a conversation that might bridge some agreement.
Before we pass it back to you, I just want to be sure that if someone who hasn't spoken yet has something to say, I want to be sure everyone gets a first crack at it. So anyone who hasn't spoken on this question? Okay, then go ahead.
I don't know if this is answering the question you asked about the ramifications of our ideas, but I just want to respond to the idea of this going back to the states. And again, I'm out of step with the pro-life movement in general on this. Most likely, I don't believe it would revert to the states. The Supreme Court could very easily change its idea about the definition of the word person. The 14th Amendment says that no state shall deny any person the right to life, liberty, and property, and so forth. So what's a person? In fact, the word state in that amendment, it's the amendment that most of our civil rights laws are based on, changed the way the country operated in terms of getting the federal government down into the business of the states. Okay, so if no state can do that, then the federal government has responsibility to make sure that these lives are not being violated by abortion, legally or illegally or whatever. It could also be done by an act of Congress if we had sufficient political support in the Congress and the executive branch to change that definition. The Constitution gives the power to make the rules for the Supreme Court to the Congress. That's right in Article 3, the article that deals with the judiciary. There's no reason why they couldn't define person in an appropriate way. It depends what they do. And even ceding to the Supreme Court the idea that they can do what they did, I have profound disagreement with it. They didn't just strike down a series of laws across the states. They struck down the founding premise of this nation that we have, as it says up there. It's self-evident. That's a premise, that we are endowed by our Creator with our fundamental right to life. Now we're not endowed by our Creator. We are granted or denied our fundamental right to life or any rights by those in power. We are just another nation based on might makes right. I want my country back.
We have about 2 minutes left. Is there anyone else who wants to make a comment?
So earlier you were speaking about men's obligation to be drafted and go into war. And that comment just made me think about how in war we have this concept of casualties of war and I guess collateral damage. And within war there is collateral damage, and the notion is ostensibly that this is going to improve quality of life. But I think people think that they're going off to war in order to defend certain ideals, and that is going to ultimately improve the quality of life. And I was just thinking that I think with the notion of what harm it is that we're being done, it's like measuring what kind of loss of life we've got in order to increase the quality of life elsewhere. And I think that's part of the calculus that ends up going on with some of the conversations around abortion in general. So it's not just knowing that we're not doing harm and needing to not do harm. There's some amount of harm that we feel that we're allowing ourselves to do because we feel that the overall result is going to be a better quality of life for those involved. And again, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree or disagree. I'm just saying that this is my best understanding, my best good faith understanding of what the conversation is that we're having. So.
Again, is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to speak before? Could you flip your name tag, because I can't see your name, before Al goes again? Anybody else want to?
I don't want to, I could respond to every one of the points that's been made here, for or against, whatever. Having worked for the military as a civilian engineer for 30 years, at one point I did some work on the just war criteria and how abortion violates nearly all the laws of war and the just war criteria, including the final criterion, which is it should be a last resort. Abortion is not a last resort except in a real and legitimate case of a medical problem. There is the possibility of adoption. So abortion is not a last resort. And as far as anything else with regard to what I brought up earlier about the draft, kind of as a little bit of a joke here, I have to wonder how my draft board might have responded if I had tried to oppose being drafted, if it had come to that. It didn't. I drew a high number. I have to wonder how they would have responded if I had tried to argue my body, my choice.
Okay, one more quick thing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'll be quick. I just wanted to also mention on the issue of women, I think another thing we need to do better or consider as an unintended consequence and make sure that we don't do this is of course there's the concern of the criminalization of women, right? If abortions are not legal and then you get an abortion, well, now what, right? And I think that one of the things we need to really lead front and center with is the idea that women are victims in this too. Women go through extreme emotional trauma, sometimes their whole lives going through this, let alone health issues. And so I think we would not, I mean, my view would be you don't criminalize women, that this is an issue of the provider and not the consumer. So I just want to throw that in there to your question.
All right, so we have given the red team their opportunity. So what we're going to do now is switch places.
Could I ask
you,
can you
yes.
summarize what the downside was?
Well, afterwards we'll have discussion. The blues will tell you what they heard you say, okay? So we move to the back and the blues move to the front. Do a passing of the torch of the microphones. Oh, we only have... We have fewer blues than reds here, okay. Oh, you're, okay, you'd like to observe, okay.
I don't feel this is a good faith thing.
Well, so you can observe and see how it goes.
Come and express that.
You could sit, yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, so, blues. We're gonna start with a question. Where do you stand on the issue of abortion and why?
So it's a little awkward for me to start because I'm someone, of course, who can never be in any danger of being pregnant or being made to be pregnant. So that I think limits my sort of moral standing here. You know, I keep thinking of, you remember those, that picture that's, if you look at it one way, it's a rabbit, but then if you look at it another way, it's like a duck. That's the same picture, that our brains work, that you can see one or you can see the other, but you can't see both at once. And it made sense to me when someone said that this issue is kind of like that we can either focus on the developing life, the fetus, the zygote, the baby, or we can focus on the person sort of carrying it, but it's really hard to focus on both. I guess I kind of aim towards focusing more on the person carrying the life, and there can be, we do have like a lot of nuanced philosophical and legal discussion about the status of that, the fetus. Whether it is, we don't have a lot of debate about whether it's biologically life, right? It is biologically alive. We do have a lot of debate about whether it is a person, a civic person with rights the same as any sort of adult walking around. And that's a really complicated question. There is no question about the civic personhood of the person carrying the life. That is a full person with rights. So when I think of it that way, it becomes very difficult for me to ever be okay with forcing someone to be or continue to be pregnant, or forcing or obligating someone to give birth against their will. And I know that for a lot of people, a lot of women, pregnancy is a wonderful thing, that they can't imagine it being anything but just it's difficult and work, but having children is just the greatest thing in the world. But I also have to listen to a lot of women for whom this is not the case, that there are medical risks, psychological risks to having children, just as there are medical and psychological risks to not having children. However, there is research that I read that, abortion is medically 7 times safer for women than childbirth is. I have to pay attention to that. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. I would be really uncomfortable, I would say, with someone who is, a day before their due date deciding, I want to get rid of them. That's a question, as someone said, about like a truly exceptional, almost hypothetical position that, well, no, I wouldn't be okay with, extrauterine viability. You can't just, but again, that's like a hypothetical extreme position. The fact that most abortions, 89.9%, happen in the first trimester, I think that's kind of where the focus of the conversation should be.
Thank you. This is hard to talk about, and I'm not really happy that I have to, because it's hard to talk about this in really personal terms that, frankly, I don't think anybody here has the right to talk about with me. They don't know me. This is my life, the most important things I have to think about in my life. And I don't want to share it, but society right now makes you, because if you don't talk about it, they take away your right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, everything. So I feel pressured to share really, really personal things that I don't want to share. So to the sharing. I believe that my life, as I currently live it, is valuable to society without having children. For example, I am a teacher. I am currently teaching the Declaration of Independence and was talking with my female student about how men have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe I am entitled to those rights as a citizen, and I believe that if I were forced to have a child, I don't believe pregnancy is a choice, that I would lose my right to those things that are important to me. I believe I don't see it as a military draft, because I believe I would no longer be able to teach important American principles, for example, like these rights, if I were forced to instead spend my life raising a child that I don't want. This is, I was raised to think that America believed that we should have a choice over how we live our lives, and the worst thing I can imagine in my life. I've had nightmares since I was 13 years old about having children. My fiance does not want children. We do not want to have kids. This is not how we want to spend our one life that we are given on this earth. And we try to make sure that I don't get pregnant, but so society doesn't make it that easy to prevent pregnancy, for one thing, and there are no guarantees against it, so things happen. I understand that. I know that my childhood would have been different if my mother hadn't had access to abortions, and I don't know if I would have been educated enough to be here defending my rights if my mother hadn't had access to abortions. So I just feel this is a question of women's right to everything we're entitled to by being an American and being in this country. This is more so for people who don't have access to preventative measures and who can't leave their state if they get pregnant. My state doesn't really offer abortion services anyway, even though it is legal. I live in Tennessee. So I don't understand, as John was saying, I don't understand why my rights are not factored in. I definitely am entitled to rights being an American. It's a huge debate whether cells, an embryo, whatever you want to call it, why are their rights more important than mine? I've already made a contribution to my country. I make a contribution every day. Why is that worth less?
Okay. I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but I think we're looking at this conversation. I've listened very carefully, and I respect everyone's comments. But pregnancy is the consequence of an action. And I think we're putting a lot of emphasis on the consequence and not enough attention on the action. Okay, as a conscious action by two people that are involved. Okay. The second point I'd like to make is that outside of the conversation of whether abortion should be allowed or not, men are not held responsible for their participation in the action that leads to pregnancy. And I think that really needs to change. I think that while women are the carriers of infants, children, babies, however you want to phrase it, whatever you're comfortable with, the point is that it takes two. So while we discuss personal rights, my stance is this. Number one, we need to pay more attention to the action and to the people involved in the action. We're not paying enough attention to what's causing this dilemma. I'm not a judgmental person, but I do believe that what I see personally happening in our society is marginalizing women too much. There's a lot of pressure on women when it comes to certain things and not enough accountability for that pressure. The divide in the genders in this country is causing a serious problem. And so until we get to the point where we accept women fully, their rights fully, on every aspect of life, then to point out this one issue and then put the weight of this one issue totally on women is unfair. Men are responsible, they play a role in a pregnancy. So therefore, I believe that beyond commenting from the sidelines as if they have nothing to do with this situation, they need to be held responsible. Okay? If we do not, if we're just going to point the finger at women and put the weight of this decision on the woman and make her totally responsible for this decision, then we are we're continuing the subjugation of women that has been going on for far too long. When it comes to the creation of life, okay, two people are involved. So why is it that when that becomes a reality, then all of a sudden, the woman becomes the villain in the story? The third thing I'd like to say, and I don't want to take up too much time, okay, it's the mindset. There's a mindset in this country that we really have to look at the big picture here, okay? There are people from every different age group in this circle here. I know for a fact that I'm much older than this young lady here. I'm 66 years old. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
29.
Okay, I have a granddaughter who is your age. All right. She also made the decision that she did not want to have children. Now, I'm a grandmother. And so when she told me that she had made the decision not to have children, part of my heart just broke, because my mother lived to be a great-grandmother, but I will not have that opportunity. But then I stood back and I said, okay, I understand what you're saying. The big picture here is not just about America, okay? It's not just about what individual state that you've come from. The big issue here is that the planet, okay, the planet is at a tipping point with people, how many people we're carrying. But when we talk about the individual, it's much easier for us to talk about someone else. But when it becomes a personal issue, then I notice people's ideas change. So the first thing I'd like to say is that when we're having this discussion, if we do not include men as responsible parties to this situation, we're doing a disservice to our country. Second of all, if we were to take away all the information and all the urbanization and all of the different things that are influencing us, when we have these conversations, we would see this entirely differently. So the big picture is what we really need to look at instead of just isolating this one aspect of what's going on in our society and making that a talking point. It's not whether I am pro or against. I am looking at the bigger picture here, and pregnancy is a consequence of an action. I don't understand why we're not paying more attention to the action and the mindset that's really the foundation for this discussion here.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left, so Wendy.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. On a personal level, because I think it is actually important to talk about our own personal experiences. I myself had an illegal abortion when I was 17. I have never had a moment of regret. I feel as if that decision affected the whole rest of my life, as it would have affected my life. I would have had an entirely different life had I had an unwanted baby at the age of 17. My sister is a retired physician who, for the last number of years of her career, was exclusively an abortion provider. I would not like to see my sister in jail. She was tremendously loved by her patients. She got nothing but thanks from her patients. She worked for Dr. Tiller, who you people may recognize his name. He was known for doing later abortions, and he was shot in his church by an anti-abortion fanatic. He was a very religious man. He was known by people who worked with him and knew him as St. George. His name was George Tiller. So, and my thing about abortion is we can, so I have my own personal feelings, but I also have sort of intellectual, philosophical feelings, which is that we can talk all we want about what we think about abortion, whether we think it should be allowed, all the different questions that we focus on. But the fact is that abortion happens. Whatever we think about it, it's always happened, it's always going to happen. And so I agree, we need to think about the big picture. We need to think about ways to prevent pregnancy. We know how to prevent unwanted pregnancy. Evidence-based sex education and availability to good contraception. So why don't we do that? I mean, obviously we don't, and so I feel like those are the things we need to focus on. Okay, so I don't want to take up all the time. Oh, you have it.
It is live. I think this is one of the hardest issues, as I see it, between what is called the political divide. And it's because to me, it's an ethical decision. And that means there's a right on both sides. There is the matter of life, period. And there is another right, which some people would not equate, but that is the right of the person who's involved most. And, that can also be the partner who can be very involved, hopefully will be involved. So that's kind of how I picture it. Things that disturb me are life is this important, and it is, so why are we not more concerned about justice in terms of capital punishment, or equally concerned? Why are we not concerned about war and the taking of life there? So just questions that go around in my head. I believe that the woman and hopefully her partner have this choice to make, an extremely painful choice for most situations. And that it's not something I personally, I made this decision when I was still of age to have children, and I would not have made that decision, I don't think. If I were in a particular position, maybe, but I don't think it's something I would have done. So like some of you have said, I would like to see more on the sex education being valid and good and robust. It's the prevention side, the medical side of prevention, where some don't have access to a lot of things for various reasons. And I definitely agree with there needs to be a lot of counseling so that that person makes the right decision for them and their family if there's a family involved.
Okay. All right, so the next question that we'll contemplate, and then we'll have a chance to come together, is what are some potential downsides to your position? And here you're invited to consider limitations of your policy ideas, perspectives on the other side that you may not understand well, or unintended consequences that come with many public policies. So, what are some potential downsides to your position?
Well, I think nobody likes abortion. It's a terrible thing for everybody. I agree with the other side talking about how we would like to have, it would be better to have fewer abortions. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. So being someone who defends abortion is a hard position to hold, and that abortions are just a terrible thing for everybody involved. So I think that it would be easier to have this debate if we had better sex education or better access to contraception, and just fewer people were put into situations where people who didn't want to have children were pregnant. This would be, but unfortunately, the situation is that a lot of people need abortion for all sorts of reasons. Some are rape, but some are just they don't want to have kids, and that wouldn't happen as much if there were other changes in our society. On a related note, I think our society doesn't have a lot of support for women who have kids. We don't have daycare. We don't have a lot of money for poor families. Women don't really get any support after they had kids. So to tell a woman that they have a responsibility to have a kid is basically saying you don't have a right to have any control over the rest of your life. If we had a different type of society, that might be less true. But that is the society that we live in. So I think that makes this debate a lot more personal for women, because they really are left on their own and men aren't held responsible for taking care of kids.
Just a note, I'm gay, so none of my actions cause babies. So obviously universal gayness is the answer to the, I mean, I do think that a lot of this conversation would be very different if it weren't a conversation about whether or not to end abortion and were a conversation about whether or not to end unwanted pregnancies, right? That would be a completely different conversation. The fact that the limitation or difficulty about taking any stance on abortion is the reality of the deep, deep disagreement by so many other people on the other side, right? And this, I think, goes for both sides, that for both sides, people who believe very, very strongly on this issue, the other side, it's really difficult to see any kind of sort of middle ground. It really is, again, like that sort of flip back and forth. It seems like an either or. It seems like, if you are very, very sort of pro-life, and then either the developing life is a full person, or none of all of our personhoods are threatened. So I don't know how to get past that disagreement, right? That's like the biggest sort of thing for me. On a less meta level, I think a limitation from my side sometimes is that sometimes I can be a little cavalier about that sort of, when I talk about a fetus, or like when I say, oh, it's just not this, realizing that for other people, for other women, that's a life, and that has to be sort of respected, and I need to make sure that I respect the fact that people see the picture in a very different way than I do.
Okay, so the downsides. The downsides is like it has been said, she said it, we're not putting enough focus on these things, you know? So the mindset in society has to change. It has to start with us. I think the value of life, everyone has a different perception of that, and that coming through their experience. So the limitation for me is that every time I bring this up, it just gets shoved to the side, swept under the rug. No one wants to deal with the solutions that are available to us. And I feel that is the thing that troubles me the most. Every individual makes choices in their lives, whether you're male or you're female. You have to be responsible for those choices. For me to judge you or anyone else about the choices that you make for yourself, I don't want someone doing that. I'm not standing in your shoes. I can't do that. Everything that we know that's happening in this country, the fact that I'm not pointing a finger, I'm just talking about facts now. Men walk away from women who are pregnant with their child. Every single day this happens. Why? Because it's the woman's problem. That has to change. That's the limitation on our policies in this country that needs to change. Until that happens, then we're going to have a consistent problem. No matter what age we're talking about, this is a problem. So when you talk about the policies in the country, we need to get more involved in changing the policies of this country. And we need to change the way we deal with the consequences of the action.
Thanks. I think that this is a very complicated question, and one of the downsides I see about the pro-choice side, my side, is that I try not to do this myself, but I'm sure I do too. Make it seem too simple, like, you know, we say it's a women's health care issue. We make it seem simpler than it is. Abortion is often a terrible decision for people, especially late in pregnancy. Lots of women don't find out that they're pregnant. You know, these later abortions, first of all, they're very, very rare. And they're never because the woman just couldn't make up her mind or changed her mind at the last minute. I know a bit about this because I've talked a lot to my sister about it. And I think that the way we talk about, the way we oversimplify on our side, I mean, it happens on, it's not only our side, but I mean, I believe our side contributes to oversimplifying it. That's a downside. I did want to say something about unintended consequences. There are unintended consequences of laws restricting abortion, and they tend to lead to more abortions. And they tend to lead to people having babies that they don't want, and that is not good for those babies, and it's not good for those women, and it's not good for those families. And those are consequences that we don't talk about. We don't talk about what leads up to the problem, the fact that, pregnancy doesn't just happen all by itself, but we don't talk about what happens afterwards either. We focus just on this one part of it, and I feel like that's a downside.
I would like there to be, well, I guess one of the unintended consequences could be that life becomes cavalier. I don't feel like having a child right now, so, or it's fine if I do that because I can always get rid of it afterward, You're already addressing those with good sex education and good contraceptive care, etc. But I see that as a downside of just saying it's a choice matter. Could become that way, or maybe some people think it is. I worry a lot about the consequences to a child who was brought into a situation where they either weren't wanted or where the conditions were already extreme and the child suffers, we're not using that as part of the conversation. I haven't heard that as a major part of the conversation. You bring the life in, and now what? There's not money for proper food and housing, and there's abuse in the family, or whatever it is. If we're going to make a absolute, then I think we have to also have in our policies things that deal with things that not accommodate, but ameliorate some of the downsides. I think that's all I have to say.
We have 2 more minutes if anybody else wants to speak about what are the downsides of your position.
Well, the downside is that people don't agree. That's the downside always. If I hold a certain viewpoint, which is we need to pay attention to the big picture, the things that are not just as one isolated thing, but, as has been said, the methods of preventing a pregnancy, the methods of understanding how pregnancy happens, and what your responsibility is to the child once it's born, and the societal conditions around women who want to have a child and die in childbirth because the medical care is lacking. Or all these are aspects of the big picture. I just keep saying the same thing over and over. It doesn't appear like anyone's listening. We're just focusing on one particular thing, and by focusing on that one particular thing, then all the related issues are just getting swept aside like they're not important. But if we don't look at the big picture, maybe that's just too overwhelming for us. But if we don't pay attention to the big picture, then I don't think it's fair to point out this one issue and keep focusing and beating each other up over this one particular issue.
I think if I saw this issue, this was raised earlier, but like if I saw a potential life as a full life, and therefore saw abortion as murder, I would ignore all of the big picture stuff because murder is more evil than anything else that matters. But because I do not see it as murder, I am able to look at all of this other stuff and think about the huge consequences for an individual and for society of taking this choice away from someone. But it makes it a really hard topic because if you believe it's murder, we probably don't care about anything, or you just say we have to figure out how to deal with it, as if it's just like, these are just bureaucratic things we have to figure out because it's just absolutely wrong. We just have to work it out. But that it's really hard to talk about it if you just have such a different orientation towards what this is about.
Any last thoughts on what the downsides are of your position?
There's one thing I don't understand about, I guess it happens on both sides, this idea of the exception for rape and incest. If you believe that abortion is murder and you're ending a life and it's just inherently wrong, I don't see what the logic is for those exceptions. I mean, for a woman having to carry a pregnancy to full term that came from rape isn't necessarily all that different from just being forced to carry a pregnancy to term that she doesn't want for some other reason. And so to me, it comes down to this idea that there are some good reasons to get pregnant. If it's not your fault, then that's a good reason to be allowed to have an abortion. But then that says to me that if it's not rape or incest, then it is your fault. And I have a problem with that.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to move into the third phase of this, which is we're going to process and harvest what we learn. And I think so that we're not now sitting with backs to each other, if we can kind of back the chairs up and form one larger semicircle, kind of pull these back and pull some in. Do you know what I mean? This is like a really awkward game of musical chairs. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Carolyn, feel free to join in or observe. Okay. All right. Okay, so the listening part was allegedly the hard part of this work. So what we're going to do is we're going to harvest with two-part questions about what you learned about how people on the other side see this issue and whether you saw anything in common. And so we're going to do this initially. We're going to have you break up into pairs of red and blue. Now, we may not be equally divided, so there might have to be a couple of triads. Now, during this discussion, what you're going to be focusing on is what you learned from the other side about how people see the issue and whether or not you saw anything in common. The purpose of this discussion is not to try to convince the other side that your side is right. So we're going to have you pair off red, blue, but there might be a couple of triads where we have two reds and a blue. And so what you're going to do is for about 4 minutes, you're going to talk about what you learned about the other side and whether or not you saw any common ground. So I'll let you find a red to pair up with and triad with, and then I'll set my timer for 4 minutes, okay? So you can go off to kind of different parts of the room if you think it'll be hard to do this sitting like this. Question? Yes, so the question is, what did you learn about people on the other side on this issue, and did you see anything you have in common? Okay, and so you're going to do this in small groups of 2 or 3 with people from the other color, and we're going to do it for 4 minutes, and then we're going to debrief as a larger group, okay? There's 5 blues and there's 7 reds, so there's going to be somewhere, is it 7 reds? 1, 2, 3. So it's not, yeah, so some of you will do it 2 reds to 1 blue, and then others will just be a red and a blue together. It may not, and that could be one of the things you observe, okay? All right, so find a partner or a triad, and I'm neutral for this purpose, so I'll set a timer. So 4 minutes, what did you learn about the other side, and what did you find in common, if anything?
All right, I'll hang on to it. Hello, hello.
This one's on. Okay, so now we're going to talk as a group. Oops. If I can stop my timer. So we're going to debrief now as a group. So let's go around the group and share with each other, what did we learn from the other side? We'll start with that. What did we learn from the other side? Anybody willing to share?
First off, agreement. There's no disagreement about sexual education and preventing unwanted pregnancies is something there was no disagreement about.
So that was a common ground.
The common ground.
Right, so we can address both, what you learned
yeah.
and common ground.
So the thing that I found of interest is that Wendy was somewhat surprised in that we Reds didn't think that we were against birth control, you know. Just because we were opposed to abortion, that we are also opposed to ways of preventing pregnancy. And that I found surprising.
So there was an assumption that if you were against abortion, you were also against contraception?
Yeah, not all Reds, but there definitely is a big crossover between people who are against abortion and people who are also against contraception or in favor of restrictions on contraception. And Bob, Bob said he hadn't heard that, and that was surprising to me because you know, because I'm a fairly long-term reproductive rights activist, and to me it's like one of those givens. So I was really surprised that he hadn't heard that. Anyway, so that was
used it myself.
Very good.
Who else would like to share?
One of the things brought out to me when I was listening to the blue side is the focus being a lot more on the embryo, the seed, the child versus the mother. And one thing that bothers me is having a government that has full control over your decision or all decisions. I think the mother needs to be considered more in the situation, and as we heard, the partner in it. But an establishment having full power over your decision and not just focusing totally on the embryo, the seed, but the mother that's carrying the child. So I kind of took that away.
Who else? Yeah.
Tara didn't get to finish what she was saying, and I was really interested in what you were going to say. Would you mind sharing?
Thanks.
Okay, personal experience, what I got out of it was that we all are struggling. You know, we're all struggling, and we're all coming from different perspectives, and we have reasons for what we're talking about. Okay, I personally was almost forced to have an abortion. I didn't want to have an abortion, but my mother, because I was young, she wanted me to have an abortion. And we almost had a knockdown, drag-out fight about this. So what I also take away is that for people in this young lady's generation and people in my generation, there is a generational difference we need to consider as well. These young people, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, they all have a different perspective on life than we do. And they're looking at the mistakes we made. So the takeaway from this is that we need to pay more attention to the world we're leaving to them and the values we're passing on to them.
I guess something I learned listening to the Reds, I felt like when I spoke on my side, like we all kind of agreed with each other. I didn't see a lot of points of disagreement, but I felt like there was a lot of disagreement among the Reds. Probably it did partially go along female and male lines. I felt like women were a little bit more attuned to the needs of women, but that wasn't entirely true. And I just thought that was interesting, that there is more of a continuum on the Red side, and I don't see that play out in terms of policy debates. It feels to me like a lot of times when Republicans make policies, they are very one-sided, and it doesn't sound like they reflect all of the ideas of people who identify as Republicans.
Any more observations from the red side?
One thing I will say, just briefly, and Atari kind of touched on this a little bit, and I don't know if I can say it in any better words, but from my view, it almost seems like there's almost no real, like, winning side, I guess. Like, it seems like no matter which view you have on this, there's always, like, some kind of downside for it. And sometimes it's even just as simple as, like, well, the other people who oppose you aren't really as happy, you know, because they don't get their way, and especially for, at least for my position, it seems like, and this can go along with something that I learned, it definitely seems like it's a difference in, I'm sorry, I'm kind of ranting, but it seems like a difference in views. Like, some people feel like their rights are being attacked, and then the opposing side of that doesn't see it as a rights issue. So for, like, my lane, then that downside would be people feel like their rights are being oppressed if I have my way, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Well, when you say that, as a red has said to me that this is just wrong, to end a life is just wrong, okay? Speaking about abortion. But then another young lady, I think this young lady said that we don't hold the same viewpoint about things that end life in other circumstances, whether it's capital punishment, whether it's crime in general, we don't have the same viewpoint. So I think that when you speak about the views, I think the confusion comes in when you're talking about ending a life in different situations, but we don't have a uniform way of looking at that. So I think that's what makes this discussion even harder. But when it comes to the woman, again, my personal experience was that I wanted this child, and I didn't, you speak about the government, I was in a situation where this was my mother, okay? That was my government, my personal government, okay? And my mother was like a woman of iron will, and trust me, the fact that I managed to defeat her was like the crowning moment in my entire life. I was able to have this child. And the only reason I was able to do it is because I kept it secret for 6 months, okay, until I couldn't hide it anymore because I knew what she would do. So speaking from personal experience, I know there is a dilemma there, but again, I made that decision in conjunction with the baby's father. So again, I have to emphasize, we have to look at both sides of this picture. Who else?
The one thing I just wanted to add is I completely agree with your perspective in terms of, I feel like abortion has been so publicized or framed completely as a women's issue. And I think I can't agree with you more from my perspective. That I think that it has to be, life was created between a man and a woman, and this is an act of responsibility. I think the responsibility has to be equally with the man and the woman. I think in so many times if there's unwanted pregnancies, it seems to me that it's been too easy for the man to walk away, put all the burden and the decision making on the woman. So I just think that that's dangerous in itself, because I think too much, I mean, it's multiple layers, very complex issue, but I think that this has to be looked at more as equally as a male and female issue, not also putting so much responsibility on the woman just because she's the one who's bearing the child or the life.
I'd like to say something real quick. I learned really in this current political climate, everything's been pulled way way right and left in this issue too. And so women that are uncomfortable, being in the middle, they're being pulled to be pro-abortion, and that's a real uncomfortable spot for people. And it's, again, this common ground we need to find, and the prevention tactics. But again, it's pulling us apart, and I think that's really unfortunate.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I just want to say a lot of times people who are pro-choice are also said to be pro-abortion, and speaking for myself, I think it's equally terrible when someone is either forced or, by the government or by their parent or by circumstances. I think it's equally terrible if they have an abortion that they don't want to having a baby that they don't want. I think it's a question of how we look at. It's such a complicated question because pregnancy can be wonderful and can be terrible, and having a baby can be wonderful and having a baby can be terrible, and it's just not. It's not a question of being in favor of abortion. It's a question of being in favor of having abortion accessible if that is the best thing, if that is the thing that is going to be best for the woman, the family, but also we also need more support for people who want to have a baby and they can't for whatever reason. I also volunteer on a hotline for an abortion rights fund where we get calls from women who are seeking abortion and they can't afford it, and a lot of those women they say they can't, they're having the abortion for financial reasons, and I think that's terrible. That's not a real choice either.
Something I picked up, just kind of relates to what you were saying, Sage, was that how much sort of polarity there is within each side. I think if there are more blues, you probably see this here too, but there seems to be a sort of, this isn't even red-blue, there's a division between those for whom this is obviously a very complicated issue that wherever you come down, you're going to make some people unhappy, versus people for whom this is utterly morally clear, and if you are on the right or wrong side, then that says something deeply about you. I think both reds and blues have that as part of their conversation, and part of the way forward has to be, how do we deal with that sort of difference between the people who believe that this is debatable versus the people who this is not debatable?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because one thing that I've been pondering or observing as a result of this experience is that I kind of had the same observation as you in your conversation with the blues. I felt like you guys were pretty much on one page. And I don't know if that, I guess you're saying the opposite, that there is differences amongst blues, but it's interesting because I know amongst conservatives there is a great divide. I mean, there are people who are on the side you said where this is a black and white issue, and then there are people who are nuanced, and then there are people who are pro-choice, and they're very conservative in, let's say, all their economic decisions. And so what's interesting about that is, in my work, I travel all over the country and I meet a lot of people, and I end up meeting conservatives who flat out will not talk to each other or work with each other because of this one issue. And so within our own ranks, if you will, there is a great divide that has not ever really truly been dealt with. And every time elections come, I think a lot of conservatives go, oh gosh, I hope this isn't a big issue because it's going to split everybody up. And it happens every time. So I think we have a lot of work to do on the red side. And I've kind of assumed, I think, that there was not that kind of polarity amongst blues. And I don't know if you run into it or if you find that. Is it really? See, I would have guessed otherwise.
Yes, there is that divide on the blue side as well. There are people on the blue side that absolutely not, by under no circumstances will I ever do that. And then we have the side that says a person should have a right to choose what happens to their body. Okay, so rest easy, it's there. But what I also learned from listening to the Reds was that the emphasis on telling someone else what they can do is a problem for us, you know? One gentleman had said about the government telling you what you can do, and then from the Supreme Court or from the state's point of view. I think that seems to be a rub with everybody, that, you know, okay, I don't have a right to judge you and to say you shouldn't do this because I wouldn't do it. But how are we going to reach the point of being able to understand that if a person is desperate enough to do something, they will find a way to do that, okay? If it's going to be a medical issue, okay, which it is a medical issue, whatever is happening with this person's body is a medical issue, and they go and they do something that's life-threatening, you know, then we have a problem, okay? So that's the way I always look at it. It's a medical issue, okay, and then I have no right to tell this person what they can and cannot do, because I can only make a choice for myself. But to put person in harm's way because the government says you cannot do this or you can do this, then I have a problem with that. I don't think we're valuing the decision enough.
Yeah, David, I also wanted to respond to your point about the government. I think like nobody wants the government making decisions for us, but I think in this case we need the government to have a position on this because they're protecting rights to choices for women. Like that's why I want the government involved. And if the government, this was talked about in the Red Circle, if the Supreme Court just overturned Roe v. Wade but didn't have a policy on whether or not an embryo was a human life entitled to the rights in the Constitution, it would be determined by the states. So it's not like we're not having the government control this, we're just having different governments control it. And then if a lot of people in America can't get rights outside of their state, so that it's still being made for them, just at a different scale. So I don't think you can try to say like, let's just let the states decide, and that is a greater path towards individual choice here, like that each community can decide, because a lot of people don't have any say over their government in the state, and they're not going to have any choices at that level. So I think the government has to be involved in this decision. I just see the government as a way of enhancing individual choice rather than preventing it.
I heard caring on both sides, and sometimes when you're out listening to all the political flack back and forth, you sort of lose sight of that. So thank you all for restoring that for me.
Anybody else? All right, oh, go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to second that. I feel like even an issue like this, which is pretty contentious, once you actually talk to somebody else, person to person, like you were pretty definitive, and I'm pretty definitive, but it's different when we talk to each other, and I think that's a Better Angels thing, and so it's just one of the reasons why I think Better Angels is wonderful, and why I guess we're all here.
Okay, so to wrap up, what we'd like to do is go around and in a sentence or two, what are you taking away from our time together this morning? And I'm going to ask for a volunteer first rather than putting somebody on the spot, but I would like everybody to say in 1 to 2 sentences what they're taking away. Do I have a volunteer to go first?
I'll go first. It's a very tough issue, and we aren't going to solve it today, but I'll leave it at that.
I think everyone here was a great people, and I think we just need to keep trying and be open.
I think my big takeaway is just a reminder that we all need to rely less on media telling us what to think, and we need to talk to each other as human beings, because when we do, I feel a lot of respect for everybody and people who shared their stories, and it just means a lot more. So I think it's important.
For myself, I just say that I really appreciate those who shared more of their story, bringing that to the table. It kind of made me realize that to some degree this has been an intellectual exercise for me. I don't have as much personal weight in this particular issue. I'm here because it's so controversial, but it hasn't affected my life, and it's good to be able to hear from people who it has very much affected their life.
What I took away is that both sides of this discussion need to have equal respect to have the values or thoughts about this issue that they have. What I have a problem with is when one side tries to force the other side to see things their way. I think we have established mutual respect for everyone, that they have a right to do that, and work on common ground.
I always like to be the downer on these things. I think one thing I'm going to take away, whether I like it or not, is just a feeling of not being valued by my society, by a lot of people in my society. And two, it's a reminder that these things we talk about at Better Angels are politics, but they're personal, and they're really hard to talk about. So I'm grateful that Better Angels tries to force us to have these very hard conversations in a way that is constructive.
I think for me, it's just the practice of listening to understand the other side versus listening to judge. And I've based a lot of my judgment and opinions on how I grew up. But I have since learned, I have a very close blue friend. We actually play music together, and I've learned in that process of that friendship to really listen to understand. Because there was a time where I was very judgmental, I stood firm in what I thought was right. But if I can learn to listen, truly listen, and understand, that's a benefit to me.
I think the conversation was so valuable, and this is repeating some of what we've heard before, but I think the value of the face-to-face conversation and the value of the storytelling, and also shows how dangerous and powerful the media is in terms of putting these issues out. I'm very active in the Republican Party in New York City. I think that's a different dynamic given the way the party is outnumbered in New York City. At the same point, I think the polarization at the national level, the dialogue that's coming out of Washington is extremely dangerous in terms of some of us who may be Republican women who are more centrist on this issue feeling that they're pulled one direction towards the right, also is extremely dangerous. So I think it's very valuable to see too in these personal conversations that it is a nuanced issue on both sides of the aisle.
The thing about debatable versus undebatable makes me reflect on the two different ways that whenever I tell people about Better Angels and what they do, their reaction is either, that is such a great idea, that is such a great thing because you're debating ideas that need to be and must be debated. That's one reaction. The other reaction is, that's horrible, how can you possibly do that? Because you're debating ideas that ought not ever be debated. I mean, that is, they are not up for debate because they are so clear, right?
I had a few minutes. I don't know really what I want to say here. What's discouraging to me is things I hear raised that, I don't think are in dispute. And I'm not talking about the larger issues, minor things about one thing or another. No one, I think, has any objection to education. But some things come along with education, such as attitudes about the kind of thing that gets us into unwanted pregnancies in the first place. I mean, I went down in the laundry room in the building I'm staying in here this morning, and there was a condom dispenser. This is the norm, I guess, for college students these days. And that's disheartening. One way or another, sooner or later, that's going to result in more unwanted pregnancies, I think, whether you're using it incorrectly or correctly or whatever. Anyway, that's the kind of thing I'm concerned about. And I don't know how much that even relates to what we're discussing here. I'm glad that people do take it seriously. I don't know where we're going with it. I don't know what else to say. Frankly, I'm getting kind of burned out about it. I've been at it about 50 some odd years, so.
We all agree that it's an extremely difficult topic, and it is always heartening being a part of some better angel thing to be reminded yet again we can have conversation, and hopefully that will get us to better places.
What I'm probably going to take away from this most is people's stories. Because before I came to this, I would say I was not the most informed on the situation from either side. So it's nice to hear all these things, and I have a lot more clear idea. And it's nice to know that it's not so this way or that way, at least with this group.
All right, any other last thoughts? A couple other people. I wound up I'm like the person with 2 drinks at the bar somehow here.
I just wanted to say what I would take away is I like this format. I wasn't sure how this discussion was going to unfold, but I think the fishbowl was actually very, very helpful. Hearing a conversation between people, between the Reds, and then us having our own conversation, I found that very helpful.
Okay, one thing that really is troubling me right now is that I don't want her to feel undervalued. I don't either. Okay? When she said that, my heart broke. Because I told her, you're the same age as my granddaughter. I don't want you to feel like that. So what I take away from this is that I have to deal with you more. I've got to find out what I can do to help you more. Okay? Because I don't want you feeling like that. Okay? I don't want any young person. See, everybody in this group, okay, I see 2, maybe 3 really young people here. The rest of us are parents, some of us are grandparents. But what about her? What about her future? What about his future? I think we're a little bit, the takeaway here is that we're kind of like in our zone and we're thinking about things that are important to us, but we're not going to be here forever, people, okay? She's going to be here longer than me, God willing. Okay, she's going to be here long. So we really need to, if we're going to take anything away from this, we need to take away the fact that we're talking about the future, her future, his future, and in extension, our future. But we really need to pay more attention to this generation. That's what I'm taking away from this. I want us all to make a commitment to get out of our head and out of our experience and out of our zone and think about what we're leaving, what we're giving, and what we're providing for the next generation that's going to be here after we're gone. That's what I'd like us all to take away from here. Because it's not about us individually, it's about us collectively. And that's what Better Angels is founded on, to create this dialogue. But where's the dialogue going? We're just going to talk? We're just not going to pay attention to her real valid concerns about how we're viewing her, how we're viewing her life, her value. And that's why I keep focusing on this big picture. Men need to step up. Men need to step up. okay? This is not just about females. The men need to step up and take more responsibility. Okay, sex education, contraception, but what about the value of life? How do we think about life? It's just like something we can just throw away? Okay, because that's the way men act. It's like, it's not anything to do with me. So we need to pay more attention to her and her generation, okay?
Any other last thoughts before lunch?
I agree that men need to step up. The problem is that men were ruled out of the picture by the Supreme Court. And that's kind of the type of thing I meant. I didn't have that explicitly in mind when I said it. But there are a lot of ideas afoot that aren't true. Men have a lot to say or a lot to do with bringing about these unwanted pregnancies. But as far as what happens after that, they've been ruled out of the picture. The Supreme Court is strictly up to the woman. There's nothing to step up to. You don't exist. You want to talk about being devalued? Try having that be a Supreme Court decision.
The reason why I didn't participate in this conversation was I was okay with tell me what you believe and why. But when it got to limitations, all I heard was defense. I didn't hear anybody talk about the problems with their position. And that created a space for me that was not safe. And so I didn't want to participate because it wasn't a legitimate or authentic conversation to me. You say men have to get involved. I don't disagree with that, but that's a generalization. He says men can't get involved because the Supreme Court has locked them out of the decision making. He's defending his position, you're defending yours. I don't see anybody hearing each other.
I think you're absolutely right as far as defending, but I'm not trying to defend anything. I'm trying to make a statement.
I understand that.
All I'm saying, I'm addressing what you're saying because, first of all, if we're talking about solutions, that's one thing. If we're trying to get our mind around the problem and the way we are dealing with that problem, I have to first speak for myself. I can't speak for her.
No, you can't.
I can't speak for you.
No,
but
you can't.
All I can do is say, here's what I see.
Yeah, I understand. No, we're not talking about solutions. We're talking about the logical conclusions of where we stand. I mean, I'm pro-choice. I am personally against abortion, and I face that, okay? I actually, had the test because I was 35 years old, and I told my husband it didn't matter whether she had Down syndrome or not. I was having a baby. So I grappled with that issue. I am pro-choice because I don't feel that my personal decision should be waved out on everybody else. I don't believe that everybody should have to make the same personal decision that I made. Okay? But there are problems with that. There are problems with my position. And we were asked to address those problems with those positions. And all we did was say, I'm right because. We never scratched the surface and said, yeah, I believe that life begins at conception, but a problem with that is, just like prostitution, people are going to find a way to have abortions. And are those abortions going to be safe? We don't want to confront that issue. The issue we want to confront is, I'm right because life starts at conception. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. I heard some nuance, but I did not hear introspection.
Well, I don't know how much more introspective you want me to be.
This is not personal. This is not personal.
Introspection is personal, Caroline. I can't be introspective to her.
No, that's not what that's not.
I say to you.
When I say I didn't hear enough introspection, I'm not talking about you personally or you particularly. I'm talking about the group.
What do you consider introspection? Because maybe you're defining it different than I am.
Yeah.
What do you mean by introspection?
This is my position, and I understand the ups and downs of it. I understand when I was in the 70s, when I went to high school, girls got kicked out of high school when they got pregnant. Okay? We fought very hard to keep girls from being expelled when they got pregnant. What we had in mind when we did that was a young girl's life should not be ruined because she made one mistake. When my daughter went through high school, you had girls that had 3 and 4 babies. That was a bad outcome from something that we thought was good. Okay?
I don't think we're really taking responsibility for the big picture choices we're making.
I agree.
When I have a certain experience, that's going to color the things that I do as a result, yes?
I agree.
Okay, so now, what we need to have a little bit more of is foresight. If we do this now, what are the potential outcomes of that decision? If we say, for instance, if we say that this absolutely cannot take place, the consequences of that decision is that when a person, a woman becomes desperate enough,
She will find a way.
she's going to resort to whatever methods are available.
My best friend's mother died with a knitting needle when I was 5 years old.
Okay, so I think foresight, more than introspection, is what we really need to focus on. We've been introspective quite a bit. We've been thinking about things a lot, but we're not thinking ahead. For foresight of what's going to come after we make a decision.
I'd like to take the conversation a slightly different direction, back toward, Carolyn, what you started us out with, and just to say that I think that we can, well, first I'll just say I think there's a big difference between nuance and introspection. I think I started out, the very first speaker today saying like I have a very nuanced position. I think there are a good number of folks who expressed nuance, but the difference between nuance and introspection, in my understanding, is like taking a look at your position, no matter what it is, digging down deep and seeing like what else you're not necessarily aware of yet. I think a big part of it is self-awareness. And the other thought that I wanted to share is that after your comment, I agree. I think that we could have done a better job being more self-aware, digging down deeper and having a little more introspection. But at the same time, my understanding of Better Angels, and a big part of why I am as involved as I am and plan to be much more, is because I think this is the best good first step I've seen anywhere. So I wanted to accede and say, like, I understand where you're coming from and I agree. But I also wanted to give us a little bit of kudos to say that, like, I think this is a really good first step. And I appreciate all of you guys stepping up and speaking your mind and sharing what you feel and what you think about this. So. And also, Carolyn, thanks for, I know, again, you're being an observer for a while, which is awesome, but I do appreciate your stepping up at the end. That was great. Thank you.
You know, when I was talking to Bill Doherty about how do we quickly set this room up to do this session, because they wanted to have the camera running and we were going to be meeting in this room up until the very last second with the larger group. And I said, oh, Bill, I just have a logistics question. How, if I do it in a circle, the camera won't get backs and the mics and this and that. And he said, which one are you doing? And I said, the abortion issue. And he said, you know what? Nowhere in America would people think that we could get people in a room and hold this conversation civilly. And he said, except for here. And I know it wasn't perfect, but I'm really grateful that all of you were willing to take that risk, have this challenging conversation, have it respectfully, and in many cases share some very, very personal stories, which I think helps us to get insight into another person's mind. So appreciate the hard work that you did here, and I want to make sure that you get a chance to break for lunch, so it's time for that, but you're welcome to keep talking to each other as well. So enjoy the rest of your day.